she's the toast
of Kalamazoo, zoo, 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 zoo.
Years have gone by.
My, how she grew.
I liked her looks when I carried her books
in Kalamazoo, zoo, 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 zoo.
I'm gonna send a wire, hopping on a flyer,
leaving today.
Am I dreaming? I can hear screaming.
Hiya, Mr. Jackson, everything's okay. A-L-A-M-A-C-O.
Oh, what a girl!
A real pimperoo.
I'll make my bid for that freckle-faced kid I'm hurrying to.
I'm going to Michigan to see the sweetest girl
in Kalamazoo.
Kalamazoo.
K
A
L A M A Z O. What a gal,
a real pimperoo. We're going to Michigan to see the sweetest gal in Kalamazoo. Zoo, 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 zoo.
Good afternoon. Welcome, and I'll call the January 31st, 2017 City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Hotchkiss is not yet present. Councilmember White? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Dominguez? Here. Mayor Schneider?
Here.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Hart? Here. And Councilmember Murillo? Here.
Great. I know Mr. Hotchkiss is on his way. Any changes to the agenda?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Public comment. We have quite a few speaker slips here, so we want to make sure we do this as efficiently as we can. We have 2 minutes here at the podium, and we'll start with Peter Marin. And is Catherine here? You're donating your 2 minutes to Mr. Marin, so you have up to 4 minutes, and you'll be followed by Kenneth Block.
As you know, I've been going to the stakeholder meeting pertaining to the RV ordinance and the attempt to find parking for people who live in RVs. And I've been thinking a lot about it, and I've realized at that meeting people are seriously trying to find off-street parking during the day for people who live in RVs. Every RVer I know is willing, except for 2 or 3, to be part of the safe parking program and submit themselves to any number of city regulations pertaining to where they can park. As far as I can tell, this problem would be solved quite simply by setting aside certain areas for curbside parking, which you've already decided to do for out-of-town visitors. So in theory, since there's curbside parking available to those visitors, it would seem to me it is possible to provide it to people who live in RVs in town, and perhaps legally required to provide such parking for people with handicap placards, because you've already made an exception to the safety question and rule. You've argued that parking in the streets for RVs is unsafe, and then you've turned around and decided that on some streets, by God, it is safe, and therefore visitors can park there. My only point is if you make an exception for visitors, and you're willing to make an exception for RVers, and you're also willing to involve the county, which has not yet happened, and talk to them about increasing the number of spaces they have available for daytime parking, you could really eliminate almost every reason for the ordinance that you have in mind. Now, I remember, as you will, that the staff suggested another ordinance where you would outlaw oversized vehicle parking on any number of streets which were too narrow for such parking. It seemed to me that's much more sensible. You're going to get a legal challenge from us, of course, in the courts if things stand as they are. I hear that you may get a legal challenge from the owners of Mercedes-Benz vehicles who are outraged by the fact that their vehicles will not be able to park anywhere. And even should you beat us in court, then if Carol Sobel goes to court and gets this law overthrown in Los Angeles, that will immediately affect Santa Barbara and make your law equally invalid. So my point is, why go to all this trouble when there are simpler ways to solve this problem? Stay out of court, control the RVers who are willing to be controlled, right, and are willing to give up parking in all the places you don't want them to park, including residential areas, and just look for places where they wouldn't bother anybody and deal with the problem in the simplest possible fashion rather than in the overkill fashion which is now at work. You will have trouble on the basis of DMV regulations. You will have trouble because of the ADA. I've been talking to the Coastal Commission, as I do, and they are absolutely unclear about what's going on in their conversations with the city. But from what I understand from them, if you modify the coastal plan, then there has to be a series of meetings and public hearings. And according to them, and I'm only going by what I'm told, they don't think that you can apply this ban in the coastal area without jumping through all the hoops that the Coastal Commission demands. I don't know if that's true. I know they're in conversation with the Planning Commission. But they won't tell me what's going on there, and nobody in the city is forthcoming about what's going on there either. Also, I know you're having trouble with getting the permitting business on site and up and running. Why go to all those trouble when all of the RVers that I know who live in town are willing to submit to the kind of program which will allow you to avoid all the problems you want to avoid?
Thank you, Mr. Marin.
Thank you.
Mr. Locke will be followed by Michael Baker.
My name is Kenneth Locke. Got a sign on my bike just put up yesterday. It says, got worthless. And what I'm finding that I just wanted to make you guys maybe aware of is that when it comes to worth and a person's worth, you know, if I asked you how much worth you had, and then I'm sorry to say that we've lost contact with worth, and then when it comes to wealth, people just assume that worth, or say, is equal to their wealth, you know, money, property, when in fact the system that we have right now has gotten people to actually believe that. And the system, our educational system, because it's really important that a person's wealth, their worth, is understood in relation to an educational value. But it turns out that the system we have, I feel that needs to be reformed and replaced, is specialized. And when it comes to, say, a person's worth in relation to them being an artist, shouldn't all the children be gauged, graded in relation to what they've accomplished through the arts, through the education? And then, say, athletics, you know, what grade did they reach? What was the value of their education? What worth did they find there, and that, you know, that education was worth receiving? But it turns out that sports right now would be a example of. I've been using an example of Roger Federer when it comes to him and his worth in relation to him being an athlete. And I'm sorry to say that he actually isn't an athlete. And he is not a teacher, so he provides no educational value. And so that's just an interesting. I thought I'd share that with you today. Thank you.
Michael Baker will be followed by Paulina Kahn.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Michael Baker, CEO for United Boys and Girls Clubs here in Santa Barbara County. I want to first thank the Mayor for attending our Youth of the Year judging and participating in that, and it was a wonderful event. And secondly, I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Dominguez and Councilmember Maria for attending our annual meeting where we honored our Youth of the Year and also handed out 92 blue cards to our members that have attended the Boys and Girls Club this past year, more than 200 days. As I told you long ago, we found that on a national study, if a child attends a Boys and Girls Club 105 times in a calendar year, they're twice as likely to graduate high school in time and lead a healthy lifestyle. So we set a goal that we wanted every child to attend a goal of 105 days a year, and we were doing very well with that. So then we raised the bar even further and said, how many kids would come 200 days a year? Well, as I just reported to you, this past year we had 92 children that attended the Boys and Girls Club over 200 days. And we had one child from our Goleta Club that attended the club 290 days. That's an amazing feat, and that child just loves the Boys and Girls Club. And just want to let you know that it's not possible if it wasn't for all you wonderful folks up there helping us out, but also all of you at home supporting the Boys and Girls Clubs. And with that, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that we always have fundraisers, and we do have a major fundraiser coming up on April 28th and 29th. It's our Rally for Kids. It's a car rally that we do annually. It's our 4th annual. You'll see more details, but you can register for that online at unitedbg.org. Again, that's United, B as in boy, G as in girl.org. And you can register for our Rally for Kids, our 4th annual. And I just also want to end by saying you guys are really lucky with the city manager that you have. I've worked with many city managers, and this guy's the best. He's doing a great job. So thank you for everything you're doing for the Boys and Girls Clubs as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Baker, may I mention that the outstanding youth was from the West Side unit, so it's a matter
That's
of pride for our West Side community.
Correct.
Joseph,
Kirkwood.
say it again?
Kirkwood. Joseph Kirkwood.
Okay, so congratulations to him. And then he goes on to compete with other outstanding youth, so we'll watch his success.
And he'll be coming here as well to speak to you.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, he was pretty outstanding. Well, all 3 finalists were outstanding, but he was amazing. He is amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Paulina Kahn will be followed by Dave Harris.
Good afternoon, Mayor Snyder and City Council. My name is Paulina Kahn. I have 2 items. I would like to request the removal of the temporary bridge on the southeast side of Cabrillo Boulevard and State Street. It is an eyesore and it blocks views. A view that people usually don't see is from Stearns Wharf. When you're looking backwards, there is a brown smudge across the arches of the windows of the restaurants there, and it looks like somebody has forgotten to take the scaffolding down. And you already know about the blocked views from the new sidewalks of the ocean, and the entire structure of Stearns Wharf is blocked by the bridge, and of course the view of the beautiful coast down to Ventura. You see little bits of blue and very narrow slats and very broad brown slats of this temporary bridge. So I would hope you will remove it. It also violates El Pueblo Viejo Historic District guidelines for the Cabrillo Boulevard Parkway. My second issue is I use the library drop-off slot a lot for dropping off books and media. What I've discovered is that in order to get out of the parking lot, we have to back up. And it's not a parking lot, it's a parking slot in front of the courthouse. And I'm wondering if we can, there are 2 solutions, a cheap one and a more expensive one. The more expensive one is to move the box 3 feet towards Anna Pamu Street and then remove the red line, the curb, also 3 feet back towards Anna Pamu Street. That would retain the parking space, and it would give a person driving to that drop-off box room to just go forward and move out into the lane. The cheaper way, and I'm not sure it'll work, is to take 3 feet from
You need to wind
the,
up, please.
Okay, from the parking spot, and then, anyway, thank you
And
very
you have
much.
it in writing. We have your letter here. Thank you, Ms. Khan. Dave Harris will be followed by Cynthia Goena.
Hello, Madam Mayor and council members.
Good afternoon.
My name is Dave Harris. I'm a general bargaining unit employee. In the downturned economy of 2009 through 2011, general employees voluntarily furloughed their pay to a total of 16.5% concessions over those 3 years. During this time, our cost of living was rising, as well our retirement and medical contributions were rising. Fast forward to today, our pay has risen 7.5% total since 2009, trailing our furlough contribution by 9% of what we gave back. Our retirement and medical contribution go up each year, far exceeding our cost of living raise. General employees with family medical coverage have been taking home less pay every month for the last 7 years. This is a serious problem and it needs serious solution. I feel if this trend continues, it will have an adverse effect on this city. The general employees were there for you when you needed our help. Now we need your help. The facts are you need people to operate this beautiful city, and we need to provide for our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cynthia Goena, and is Kelly Broderson here? There you are, and you're giving your 2 minutes, okay? And then Rick Welsh will follow Ms. Goena. So you have up to 4 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of council. My name is Cynthia Goena. I'm a field representative for SEIU Local 620, representing the city employees in the general unit. Some of those members have taken their own unpaid time to be here to speak to you today about their livelihoods and their careers in public service and their dedication to their jobs and to the city. There are many others who could not be here today, but they're here in spirit. And in addition, I have a petition signed by many of the people who couldn't be here today. The signatures are on here. There's 7 pages of signatures, and I'm going to give those copies to...
Give it to the clerk right here to give Sarah.
Sarah? Mm-hmm. Thank you. We're here to speak about our bargaining process. The general unit had been in bargaining since starting in July, starting in earnest in August. And on December 5th of last year, city management declared an impasse after submitting to us a last, best, and final offer, saying that we were too far away and it was not fruitful to continue bargaining. The contract term expired on October 1st of 2016. So here are the points of disagreement. I'm going to summarize. First of all, the salary increase. Management's offer included a 3% increase, but it is not retroactive to October 1st, 2016, as you budgeted it to be. So the general unit members did not get the full 3%. They would only, under management's offer, get that starting when council approves the contract. We're going into February now. We're not sure when that contract is going to be approved. So this results in pressure to settle on management terms. We don't believe that's bargaining in good faith, and as a result, the general unit employees are deprived of legitimate raises that you've already budgeted for them. We also have an issue about breaks. City employees in this unit have no legal right to take unpaid meal breaks or 15-minute rest breaks. Those breaks are completely at the discretion of management unless they're for lactation or for heat exhaustion under OSHA. So we're asking that those breaks be allowed unless there's a legitimate business purpose or an emergency, and management team said no to that. Medical benefits, you're going to hear more about that from a number of people, and already Dave has talked about that. Management is offering no increase in medical benefits despite rising health costs. We have an issue on changes to job duties. We're asking for guaranteed training and the right to negotiate over changes in job duties. The total number of general unit employees that you as council have authorized has gone down from 504 in fiscal year 2008 to 420 today, which is a substantial reduction. And this is, as was mentioned by the prior speaker, a lot of people gave up furloughs in order to save these positions. but there's been a drastic reduction in the number of positions available to perform this important work for the city. We are informed, in response to an information request, that 42 of the 420 positions are currently unfilled. So as a result, the workforce is now below 400 to do the work of 500 people 10 years ago. You might say that there's actually more work to do now, but many, many fewer people to perform it. So as city management has slashed the positions and increased workloads, although management numbers remain stable since 2008.
Thank you.
That's the end?
That was 4 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless someone wants to waive who submitted a slip,
Anyone?
but you got a lot of people talking. We're
Okay.
definitely listening.
All right.
Donate your time. All right. Go ahead. You have another 2 minutes.
Okay. We have also asked for 3 positions to be realigned in the benchmark because of the similarities of their job descriptions, and there are several other requests that I won't mention right now. I wanted to say that tomorrow we will be meeting with a neutral mediator from the State Public Employees Relations Board to see if we can reach an agreement through mediation. And if no agreement is reached, we will proceed to the fact-finding process in which a neutral professional from the state and a representative from each side reviews the facts and makes findings, which hopefully will a fact-finding recommendation based on salary survey and looking through city finances to see if there is in fact a shortfall, or if see what the finances really are, and if these are unreasonable requests. That recommendation would be made, and that would be made public, and we would hope to reach a conclusion at that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rick Welch will be followed by Samuel Blackwell.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Rick Welch, a member of SEIU Local 620. Now, the following may sound familiar to some of you. One of the biggest challenges facing the entire South Coast is attracting and retaining qualified personnel. With the high cost of housing and increased traffic congestion, more and more people are choosing to live and work in other areas, such as Ventura County and San Luis Obispo County, to avoid the longer commutes. The problem is amplified due to the large number of baby boomers nearing retirement age. That actually is from a city administrator's budget message. That particular one was from 2008, Mr. Jim Armstrong, and I think he must have copied and pasted it because it was in earlier budget messages as well. The point being, councils past have heard the need to attract qualified personnel, and I would suggest, especially the personnel in direct contact with the public or who has an effect on the public. I'm sure you wouldn't want a bitter bureaucrat addressing your constituents' concerns. There was that dark period when we gave concessions and the city was able to avoid layoffs, and we were on the same team. Then we have a few years of minimal pay increases, and many of us began to wonder whether we would ever recoup what we gave up. And now, as the economy has improved, and I keep reading that our TOT revenues are increasing, I ask that we maintain that team spirit with enough financial support to keep our spirits aloft. I read once in Training Magazine that it takes the equivalent of 1 year's salary to train a new hire. So already, if the previous budget messages I mentioned are still accurate, the city has a high turnover rate. I certainly see it in the area where I work, where there's a lot of new faces. So from an economic perspective, here's another reason to take steps to retain your workforce.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Samuel Blackwell, and is Sarita King? Sarita here? I'm sorry? Oh, there you are. Thank you. And Mike Woods? Okay, thank you. So you have up to 6 minutes, and you'll be followed by Chris Bell.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, members of Local Union 620, employees of the city, and citizens of Santa Barbara. I would like to talk a little bit about brakes. This morning on the way to work, I saw a lot of brakes, brake lights, designed so we don't run each other over. Really, I want to talk about the brakes we need to have during our workday, because it's not just all go, go, go. running each other over and being run over in more than one way, including our customers, the citizens of Santa Barbara. So from the break of dawn till the end of day, we are refocusing many times, finishing jobs, and setting new priorities. Breaks encourage social health, teamwork, a chance to regroup, and charge again. There are many lessons man learns from nature. There are many technologies man gains from nature. All creatures in nature take breaks. Here is a scientific study entitled 5 Science-Backed Ways Taking a Break Boosts Our Productivity. How many times do you sit down to get work done and find yourself working and yet getting little completed? Do you set aside big chunks of time to get work done, only to end up feeling like you've barely made a dent in it? Do you have that one task that always seems to get pushed off to the next day? Do you end your workday feeling drained rather than satisfied with what you've accomplished? This is a sign that you aren't taking enough breaks or aren't taking them effectively. We prize this idea of being busy and see taking a break or getting distracted as a problem. In reality, rest and relaxation are tools our bodies and minds are trying to desperately to get us to use. Most of us are aware that taking breaks from physical activity is necessary to recuperate and prevent injuries. Taking breaks in our mental work is equally helpful and can be a great boost to our productivity as well. Number 1, taking a break once an hour increases our work productivity. Recent studies show that those who give into some kind of diversion or distraction once an hour perform better than those who just keep at it without a break. After a while, our brains numb out a bit to the constant stimulation, and we become unable to continuously treat the task as important. Taking a break allows us to come back to the job at hand with renewed energy and sense of purpose. Number 2, a break can serve as a creative fuel. No matter how much you love your work, we cannot keep creating when we are on empty. Something as simple as a 10-minute conversation with a friend or watching an inspiring video can give us much-needed boost or point us in a new direction if we've been stuck. It is difficult to see things from a new perspective or find new insights when we come at it the same way all the time. Taking a step away, literally or figuratively, might be just what we need to recharge. Number 3, physical movement keeps us from being mentally stagnant. We are not designed to sit around all day. As difficult as being sedentary is on our bodies, it's not helpful for our creativity and productivity either. Getting up for a few minutes and getting our blood flowing and some more oxygen to the brain is a necessary piece of the workday. An afternoon tea break, number 4, gives us more than an effective caffeine boost. The health benefits of tea stem from more than just the antioxidants in it. Taking the time away from your work, as mentioned earlier, is the first step in the right direction. Instead of the immediate gratification of a fast food snack, tea takes time. The process of making and drinking a cup of tea makes us slow down and gives us time for a much-needed pause. A small amount of caffeine and hydration are a big help too. Number 5, playing hard helps us working hard. If you typically have an afternoon energy slump, consider a lunchtime workout. Studies have shown that a moderate level of cardio activity can boost creativity and productivity for 2 hours afterward. Plus, the change of scene and focus may just be the shift you need for your next breakthrough at work. The next time you feel guilty about taking a break, consider how much more effective it may make you in the long run. So my final comment, just as Federal and state employees have language for breaks. We would like language for 2 15-minute breaks. We need that language so we don't languish without breaks. Wow, where did the time go? Life is short. Are you ready for a break? Because I'm going to end it short and give you a break right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris Bell will be followed by Chris Short.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Chris Bell. I am a production specialist with City TV. I'm here to offer you maybe a unique perspective because over the last 17 years, I've gotten to know a lot of these people during my job, covering what they do, promoting that, and informing the public about what they do. And I thought it would be important for you to hear some of the things that they're doing, some of the good work that they're doing right now. And pardon me while I read this list because it's a long one and it's only a partial list too. That work includes responding to and repairing broken water mains at all hours of day and night, shepherding cutting-edge creeks restoration, water quality and conservation projects from concept to completion, working with our kids, providing them safe and healthy and fun activities in parks and recreation. They're operating and maintaining really complex water and wastewater and recycled water system. I don't know if you guys have been over there, but it's incredible what I had to do all their training sessions. Crazy. They're providing the best facilities and traveler experience at the airport. They're creating and providing innovative and engaging programs, making our library system one of the best in the nation. They're saving the city water and energy. They're making our waterfront a jewel for all types of users. They're maintaining a fleet of vehicles that is increasingly fuel efficient and complex. They're making sure our water is safe to drink. In short, we're all part of the same city family that helps make Santa Barbara such a great place to live, work, and visit. So I hope you will consider that and keep that in mind when you consider what I think is a very modest proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Short will be followed by Annette Nino.
Thank you. I'm going to read this. Thank you for the opportunity to speak as an SEIU Local 620 member. I've been with the city for over 15 years, many of them lean years. I've gained a lot of respect for how this city has managed its budget, personnel, and also an equal respect for my fellow dedicated union workers. Over the years, we have endured a great recession, cutbacks, furloughs, recommended one-week Christmas vacation, paid with our own reserves, no hires, and yearly pep talks on how we can do more with less. This is with no major layoffs, and we greatly appreciate that. Please clarify how the city quickly decided on a 3% pay increase effective last October for management positions while continually delaying the union negotiations with unreasonable proposals like the initial 2% plus 0.5% and deferred for 6 months until April of 2017. What is the city's rationale for applying such inequitable and deferred cost savings? Is our work less important in fulfilling management's goals? Did we provide less professional service or time to the city? Are our families less worthy? Was sharing the cost burden equally for everyone ever considered? We all are government workers serving a scrutinizing public. Shouldn't we all bear these minimal cost increases equally? Thank you for your attention.
Annette Nino would be followed by Amber Workman. I can't read your last name, but Amber, sorry. Thanks. Hello.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. I am reading the following speech for Sue Sadler, who cannot be here today. She is a member of SEIU Local 620. She has worked for the City of Santa Barbara since 2004. I'm going to read her speech now as she wrote it. I am also on the General Unit negotiating team and would like to speak to you about one of our specific contract requests, job inequities, salary survey, and benchmark positions. I have seen firsthand some of the blatant inequities of certain job titles and their descriptions, along with the glaring inequity in pay for the people who fill these positions. We have asked the city for a newer, more accurate salary survey of our jobs with comparable cities, but we were denied. We have asked for more appropriate benchmarking positions to bring equality to our workers, but we were denied. Some positions have simply outgrown their original description and purpose and have been given more and more substantial and important responsibilities, yet with no increase in pay. This has gone without proper recognition or acknowledgement by management, and therefore these positions are being paid far below their counterparts in other cities and counties. The city has also ignored the increased workload and responsibilities put on many general unit employees due to the hiring chill. The city has reaped the financial benefits of the last few years of positive economic times, boasting about increased sales tax and bed tax revenues, yet they turn around and tell us how desperate and uncertain things are, and how we should be lucky to have jobs. We are the meat and bones, the face and muscle of the city of Santa Barbara, from those who work tirelessly to maintain our buildings and streets, who clean, paint, fix, and restore them, to inspectors and code enforcement officers who often do the behind-the-scenes dirty work in order to keep the city a prime tourist destination, to the hard-working water resources team who has dealt with the worst drought ever in our history, yet still keeps the water flowing to our homes. We are the general unit, 398 strong and united. We are the backbone of this beautiful city, and we deserve fair and decent compensation for our work.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Amber, and then is James here? You're okay, and then Ignan, Terrence, you're okay. So, Amber, you have up to 6 minutes, and you'll be followed by Stanley Macias.
Madam Mayor and Council members, my name is Amber Workman-Hatzidakis.
Thank you.
I'm here today speaking as an SEIU Local 620 member regarding our negotiations and representing my fellow General Unit employees. I'm proud to say that I work for the City of Santa Barbara in the Parks and Recreation Department, and I'm here today because, in the words of a very wise man, I believe that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. As I'm sure you're aware, we've been at the table attempting to negotiate a fair and reasonable contract since August 17th of 2016. In that time, we've had 12 meetings, and on December 5th, the city declared impasse. It feels as if the entire bargaining process has been stalled by management, with the city making little to no movement. It feels hopeless at times. In my opinion, we're asking for a fair and equitable contract, nothing to break the bank, and nothing the city hasn't already given to our coworkers in both safety groups and management. Which brings me to my question. Why does our group, SEIU Local 620, deserve less in benefits than other groups? The general unit makes up approximately 40% of the City of Santa Barbara workforce. We're typically the frontline staff, the people keeping Santa Barbara beautiful, whether it be digging ditches, greeting patrons, keeping your city vehicles running, repairing roads, or cleaning our beaches and parks. Our group works just as hard as any other City of Santa Barbara employee, and we are already statistically the lowest paid. At this point, any salary increase we receive will be eaten up by the cost of our health benefits. So while any increase is always much appreciated, some relief to our health benefits would help a great deal. Income inequality is a global issue. However, the U.S. ranks at the top of the list for income inequality globally. I've included in your packets empirical evidence of this if you'll look at Exhibits 1 through 4. Furthermore, Santa Barbara ranks in the top 5 cities for economic inequality here in California. My question to you is, why do managers who have a base salary of $172,122 a year receive an additional $1,718 per month on top of their normal salary towards their health benefits or to cash out that money, while general unit employees, such as recreation coordinators, whose base salary is only $52,283 a year, are only granted a maximum cash out of $362.32 a month if they choose not to sign up for benefits. Using this example, you see that those in management earn an average of 229% more in salary than general unit employees, and yet they also receive an additional 374% more money back to put towards their health benefits or as they see fit. As anyone can see, there's a clear disparity here. The people who need the extra help with health benefits are left having to pay the most, and they don't receive the same medical reimbursements as the groups who are, in fact, making the most. Please review Exhibit 5 for a visual representation of the disparity. This issue does not only affect those that are in the general unit. An increase to our health benefits will benefit everyone in this room, including management and mayor and city council. Research proves that middle-income earners, such as those in the general unit, are the ones who keep our economy going because they generate the largest percentage of consumerism. When you account for the rising cost of health care, housing, child care, and education, you see the negative effect on a middle-income earner's disposable income. If the city of Santa Barbara were to grant us our increase in pay as well as our increase in health benefits, we would be left with more disposable income that we could use here in the city. This is less the case for the high-income earners, whose statistics show tend to save their money rather than spending it locally, which makes them less likely to contribute to our GDP as well as our local economy. In conclusion, the truth is that you always know the right thing to do. The hard part is actually choosing to do it. I hope that you choose to do the right thing as it relates to our contract. Thank you for your time and consideration on this serious matter.
Thank you. Stanley Macias will be followed by Patrick Henry.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Stanley Macias. I'm the SEIU chairperson representing the general unit, and I've been employed by the city of Santa Barbara for 20 years. I'm currently on the bargaining team, which is negotiating our contract. As you know, we've been without a contract since October 1st. We've been at impasse since December 5th, and we filed for mediation December 15th, but as yet we couldn't schedule a meeting until tomorrow, February 1st, not due to our effects. I feel the city's bargaining team doesn't see the general unit as a priority, and some of the tactics used at the bargaining table are not in good faith. The budgeted amount for pay increases was 3%. That's no secret, and yet we were offered 2% after ratification and then another 0.5% in April. When our team refused that offer, we were then offered 2.5% after ratification by council, and then another 0.5%. All the other bargaining units received their full 3% increase on time. I ask, why is the lowest paid unit asked to take a lesser amount for a lesser period of time? Does that seem fair? When asked about retroactivity to October 1st, we were told the council had no interest in pay increases retroactive to October 1st. We've made a lot of revisions to our proposal to try to reach an agreement with little to no movement on the city's bargaining team, who I might add already has received their pay increases. All we were looking for is fairness. I don't feel we've been unreasonable with our requests. A lot of our issues are non-monetary, and the issues that are monetary aren't very substantial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Henry, and then it'll be Audrey Ritchie, Russ Douglas, Julie Thomas, and the final speaker will be Kathleen Gu.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and esteemed council members. My name is Patrick Henry. I'm waterfront property specialist. I stand before you today as one of many. I'm one of the many people who work for the city of Santa Barbara in the general unit with the expectations of earning a fair wage to feed and clothe our family and to see their welfare. The city has negotiated a retroactive salary increase for all the other departments, unfortunately, but not for the general unit. This policy of called Me Too is perfectly okay for the managers and supervisors, but it doesn't seem to include us, the workers who sweep the streets, who fix the broken pipes, who clear the clogged sewers and fix the police cars so they can respond, or for the fire engine so they can respond to the next call. We're just asking for the same increase of 3% that was given to all the managers and supervisors in the police department and the fire, retroactively. That's what's fair. Telling us that simply because we're not managers or supervisors, we're just not as important, that we don't count. We're willing to compromise on many other items, but to refuse this same increase amount to the rank and file is just like a slap in the face. Please consider the rank and file their fair and equitable pay increase. Please negotiate fairly with us. That's all we ask. As it was said at the end of the Pledge of Allegiance, with liberty and justice for all. That's all we ask. Thank you.
Audrey Ritchie. Andre, hello.
Hello. Good afternoon, Mayor, fellow City Council members. My name is Andre Ritchie, born 1966, Cottage Hospital. I'm here with Local 620, been negotiating with my fellow Local 620 members since, I believe, 2002. I'm here today to speak on behalf of my fellow co-workers about contract negotiations. We have high hopes that things will take a turn for the positive in tomorrow's mediation session. I'm sure you know we reached a stall in these negotiations. After everything else in this contract, what we're asking for is fair and a fair agreement. That's what we're asking for. And I ask you to take a minute to understand that all of our families have the same needs, whether you're a policeman or fireman. Our families, Local 620, whether you work for a parking attendant, we have the same points that they do. We have the same cares that they do. The same hospital bills, all those things. So be it fire department, police department, we're all in the same boat here. And we deserve the same respect and the same fair contract that they get. Now, it's very costly to live in Santa Barbara, as you all know. I was born and raised here, so trust me, I know. And what we're asking for is just something fair. And in these negotiations, I feel that we're not getting a fair shake. And I hope tomorrow that this will be a step in the right direction for us to get that fair shake. Thank you.
Russ Douglas?
Madam Mayor, council members, I'm representing Local 620 like the rest of these purple guys. I joined the city back in 2004, and it's been a great job. Medical benefits weren't an issue. It was just something we all had. Around 2008, 2009, the Affordable Care Act, it kind of seemed like it really pushed all the insurance companies off the charts, and we've been paying for it ever since. All these premium hikes, we're blamed first on that, and then now it's high claims rate. But whatever it is, every open enrollment, I send a little email back to our benefits department saying I can't afford this. So I'm here to speak on behalf of that. As mentioned by others, the cost that as you go up the position ladder, that is, in your career, you get more perks, and yet they've got also more pay to handle their medical expenses, which should be the same for everybody. So this year, the families received a 40+% increase in premiums, excuse me, which was quite a hit. So that's when I decided to check in with the union and see if there's just what's going on here. So it's just not working. We need other choices, and I urge the city to consider maybe revisiting being medically self-insured. All employees should have the same benefit cost and or perks. Provide more options like MediShare or Agile or whatever unveils following this year, and at least change the policy to allow us to go outside the city for our benefits. Anyway, we're all in this together. We're just asking that you help us move this into something reasonable, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Julie Thomas?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Julie Thomas, and I'm a Recreation Coordinator for the Parks and Recreation Department, and I oversee adapted programs and inclusion services. These are programs, as you know, that serve individuals with disabilities, health, and special needs in our community. I have worked for the department for 13 years. I'm a military brat and was raised to provide a lifetime of service as taught by my dad. My coworkers and I are extremely dedicated to providing the highest quality programs to the community we live in. We work hard and are willing to take on additional duties and responsibilities to keep things afloat. My dad was in the Navy. Recently, I was asked to also coordinate the services that Parks and Recreation provides during many of our after-school programs, a job that was formerly held by a full-time coordinator who moved out of Santa Barbara. We are all working harder with less resources. As a single mother, it's getting more and more difficult to make ends meet with the increasing cost of living here in Santa Barbara. So I would like to ask that Council encourage administration to show that they value their employees by compensating them fairly for the important work and service we are providing to the community. This would mean approving equitable salary increases and offering the same benefits that supervisors and management have been given. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Gu.
Madam Mayor and council members, I'm speaking this afternoon as a long-term, nearly 20-year SEIU member and employee of the city. I completely support my fellow union members, and I concur with their views to put forth today. I have spent the majority of my life working diligently for the city, but my main focus today is to speak on the smaller aspect of rollover vacation time into employee deferred compensation plans. In recent budget crunch years, staff shortages have often caused employees to double up or even triple up on their workloads in an effort to cover duties of fellow employees not replaced due to hiring freezes, and it's the situation that still exists today. As a direct result of these increased workloads, employees were forced to often accrue large vacation banked hours. Again, due to budget crunch situation, these banked hours were requested and preferred by the city in lieu of employees cashing out those hours into their paychecks. Very recently, in an effort to aid employees in reducing their large accrued vacation time, the city allowed permanent employees with large banks the ability to cash out some of their banks at the end of the annual year. As expenses continue to rise and wage increases, raises were given up, frozen, or withheld, many employees depended heavily on these sorely needed end-of-the-year vacation cash-outs in order to subsidize their salaries to pay for medical bills, pay their mortgages, taxes, or even to purchase Christmas presents that could not be otherwise afforded. The city has recently rescinded all these employees' abilities to cash out their vacation time. In return, managers and supervisors were given due compensation with increased cafeteria plans, pay, or contributions to retirement plans. The general employees were hardly given anything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today. We certainly heard you loud and clear. On your way out, if you could take your conversations outside the council chambers so we can continue on with the meeting, that would be most appreciated. Thank you for all being here. That concludes public comment.
Madam Mayor, I had
Yes.
a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Casey, did you get a copy of the letter? I wanted to ask if you know why the January 23rd mediation was canceled and needs to be rescheduled.
Madam Mayor, I don't know, but it is scheduled for tomorrow. I can get back to you and find out.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Okay, consent calendar. I believe there's an item or two to read.
Item 1, California Emergency Management Agency designation of agent to close Zaka Fire disaster assistance claim. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara designated Robert Samario, finance director, as City of Santa Barbara's agent for California Emergency Management Agency disaster assistance for 3 years expiring January 31st, 2020.
Thank you. Without further objection, we'll waive further reading. There's a request for a question on item 4, and then some speaker slips on item 6. So if you could read item 4.
Item 4, professional services agreement with CGM LA Inc. for the Cabrillo Ballpark renovation project.
Thank you. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought the public as well as the council could benefit from having Ms. Zachary walk us through this, if you would. It was a little hard to read in our packet, so maybe you can clarify some things or just tell us what's up.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, council members. So this is Cabrillo Ballpark, and just to orient you, the upper end of the slide is Milpas Street in Calle Puerto Vallarta, and the lower end is Cabrillo Boulevard. We're all very familiar with aspects of this park. On the west side is the Chromatic Gate, which was recently cleaned by the County Arts Commission, so it looks nice and bright. And then on the far right corner, at least in the east side, that is the corner of Milpas Cabrillo Boulevard. It's directly opposite the Santa Barbara Inn. The proposed project's actually been in the making for 7 years. It started out as a critical community concern as a result of the type of activity that was occurring in this park, negative activity that prevented the general public from actively using it. Over the years, we've made some minor improvements. We've been working on this capital project more earnestly for the last 2 years. And I'm going to just walk through, since it's not possible to use a pointer since it's on the overhead, beginning at the Milpas and Kayapor de Vallarta entrance. We will be redoing that entrance to improve accessibility, open that corner, make a presentation as to that park. You will see that there is a sidewalk that goes all the way around the park. We're also making some interior connections. And adjacent to two of those interior connections, one at Milpas and the other at Cabrillo, there will be some exercise fitness equipment similar to what we recently installed at the Andre Clark Bird Refuge. That will continue around toward the Chromatic Gate for more exercise equipment. This was a key request of members of the community to have a walking path around the park, but then also have ability to do drop-in exercise. The ballpark, the ball field aspect of the park is a critical element. We propose no changes except to upgrade it. It's in dire need of upgrades. The irrigation needs to be replaced. So that's a key feature of the project. When this was last before council, there was discussion about a basketball court, and that basketball court was conceptually located along Cabrillo Boulevard. At the adoption of the FY17 budget, some funding was removed from this project with the idea that we would move forward without the basketball court at this time, but that we would complete the design and the work such that if at any time in the future funding was made available and it was something that the community wanted, we could actually go ahead and put a basketball court in, even with all these changes.
Quick question. We have a drainage problem at the western end of the field. Are we doing anything about that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hodgkiss, yes. I mean, it's challenging given its location close to the beach, so there's a certain amount of water that is challenging to drain, but we will be doing quite a bit of regrading of the field and then further storm drain improvements to the field to improve the flow.
So we're going to raise the level of the field slightly?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then item 6, if you could read item 6.
Item 6, subject approval to exercise the option to extend the current lease for the police annex
That's
building.
item 5.
Sorry, you're correct. Item 6, accept donation of trauma kits from the Santa Barbara Police Foundation.
Great. Thank you. Mike McGrew and then Greg Hans. Come on up. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Council. My name is Greg Hans. We've all met before. You know my esteemed colleague, Mike McGrew. And with us today, again, board members from the Santa Barbara Police Foundation, Craig Case, Pamela Jeremiah, flew in specially from Costa Rica to be here, and John Van Donge, who we've recently added to the Police Foundation board. You guys probably also recognize John from his work at the PAL board also. So we're very lucky. This is only a part of our board, and we have 6 other people that help us out, but I wanted them to be recognized for the hard work they do. As you guys know, they do an amazing amount of work to make these sort of presentations possible. Today, we wanted to donate to the city and the police department a total of 65 of these trauma kits. I don't know if you guys wanted to take a look at them, but what they are specifically is with the increase in combat medicine over in the Middle East, we found out that a tourniquet is probably the best life-saving unit that we can have in a trauma-type situation where we have heavy bleeding. We've been working with the department for a few years and just couldn't find the money in the budget to get these new trauma kits that have the tourniquet and the combat gauze. We worked with the Police Foundation, and they funded it for a total of 65 of them, which means we'll be able to put one in every police car, every detective car, and all of our police motors. You guys might remember the tourniquet, Army veteran helped save somebody's life out on Coast Village Road or on Old Coast Highway about a year ago. Used his belt as a tourniquet. He had learned that over in the Middle East. So hopefully we never have to use these, but the reality is at some point something bad's going to happen. So we're very excited to have these and to donate 65 of them to the Santa Barbara Police Department. I believe the total cost was about $3,500. So thank you for your support.
Great. Thank you very much. You can pass that around and Look at that. Don't open it, though.
Yeah. Don't break the seal.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
and
for
for
everything.
all the great work the Police Foundation does each and every year.
On an admin note, Pamela Jeremia is now our new president. She
Oh,
took
great.
over for Joanne Fenard.
Oh, well, great. Fantastic. Congratulations.
I wanted to speak on number 9.
And number 9,
Yeah.
yes, we'll get there. Thank you very much. All right, is there a motion for the consent calendar? Okay, moved by Hart, second by White. All in favor?
Aye.
Great, that's unanimous. Thank you all. Report from the Finance Committee, Mr. Hart.
Yes, the Finance Committee discussed the item that was on the agenda, the fiscal agent report and the investment report.
Thank you. And report from the Ordinance Committee, Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Ordinance Committee met today to further discuss the upcoming non-smoking ordinance, and we have some recommendations that we will be forwarding on to the full council within a few weeks.
Thank you. All right, item number 8.
Item number 8, presentation from Visit Santa Barbara on cruise ship economic impact study.
Great. Thank you for your patience earlier, Mr. Nagadykes. Welcome back.
Okay, so we just need to get the slide on. There we go. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Kathy Chenega-Dykes. I'm president and CEO of Visit Santa Barbara, the tourism marketing agency for the South Coast. And I'm here today to present the 2016 Cruise Ship Passenger Survey and Economic Impact Study. And I will be joined by Erin Francis Cummings. She is the principal with Destination Analysts. They are the research company that we have contracted based out of the San Francisco area to conduct this study. And as a reminder, the last time we conducted this study was 2013. We thought it was important to update the findings. There have been changes in the economy and certainly to the industry as a whole. As we know, this has been a success from the start, but if we take a step back, it really was an effort to develop the cruise ship industry. It took root at the height of the recession, and in fact, it was the suggestion of Councilmember Hotchkiss, who contacted a number of us, various agencies, to see what are the possibilities of bringing the cruise ship industry and really looking at direct revenues to the community, again, during this very tough time. As often in the case in Santa Barbara, we all joined forces to find a solution for the problem. It was an alliance of a number of community leaders and organizations that really worked together, all with a different function and responsibility to develop the cruise ship industry that we're seeing today. And it was a perfect case study of this coalition that worked so successfully to establish this new economic generator that included elected officials, the Waterfront Department, Downtown Santa Barbara, the Chamber of Commerce, as well as Visit Santa Barbara. And if we take a look at this chart, you'll see the number of cruise ships that have been arriving here in Santa Barbara over the years. In 2016, we saw 29 of those cruise ships. When we took a look at the strategy, it was really about how do we bring cruise ships to the community. Not only that, but also making sure that we're serving the passengers effectively at our port of call. And as you will hear later on, a significant percentage of these visitors are first-time visitors to Santa Barbara. So it was so important for us to make a very good impression. And we also wanted to coordinate these cruise ships in a way that mitigates any possible disruption to our local lifestyle or the environment. And we continue to partner, certainly, with all of the various agencies, including Downtown Santa Barbara, the Waterfront, the Chamber, MTD, and more. In terms of timing, generally these cruise ships arrive from September through December, and then again in January, primarily through May. We'll see a few ships arriving this June, but they're actually different ships. One is called the World, which houses a couple of hundred passengers, and people actually buy residences on there, and they will be overnighting here. But I think what this implies is that there's a very balanced and a very thoughtful approach to the cruise ship industry, not accepting cruise ships during the summer season when it's already very crowded, as we know, here in town, but primarily it's about generating off-season business. And the Waterfront does a fantastic job, certainly carefully vetting each of those cruise ships, too. As we know, the benefits are to boost off-season business for our local tour operators. And in fact, many of the tour operators that benefit from the cruise industry are small little operators who would not be able to exist without that industry. The industry certainly benefits our restaurants, our wineries, and our local attractions and retail industry. It also provides exposure to Santa Barbara and encourage potential future visitation with overnight stays. So not only does the industry provide direct benefits, certainly with every cruise ship we saw immediate revenues pumped into the community, but for us at Visit Santa Barbara, it's about future visitation as well, too. And certainly all of the head fees collected go toward the waterfront improvements. And these are some quotes from some of the local tour operators. And again, many of these businesses could not exist without that industry. In fact, Tara Jones, who's with Eat This, Shoot That, hopefully you've all taken her tour. She has a wonderful walking and photography tour. But she mentions that she's been working with Carnival and Holland America for the past 3 years. And this past year, she nearly doubled what they've made from their guests in 2015, which amounts to roughly 20% of their total sales for 2016. That's pretty significant. And then Wine Adventure states the revenue that they receive from the cruise ship industry accounts for about 70% of their entire revenue for the year. And then certainly Teddy Drew of Santa Barbara Trolley is one of the first tour operators involved with cruise ships. They have benefited from the growth of the cruise ship arrivals, and they're now able to employ more drivers and staff year-round. So right now we're going to present the study and the findings. And again, we contracted Destination Analysts. They are a leading industry research firm. We've worked with them on a number of different studies, selected to administer and conduct this study. And then the primary objective, it was to arm our industry with updated critical information about Santa Barbara South Coast, cruise ship visitors, as well as other data. It's really about helping us better sell Santa Barbara as a premier destination for leisure and group travel. And with that, I'm going to ask Erin to step up and present the key findings.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, Council, it is an honor to be here and present these findings to you. They are very good news. Again, I'm Erin Cummings. I'm the president of Destination Analysts. We are a market research company that serves the travel and tourism industry. And this is the second time that we've conducted this research for Visit Santa Barbara on behalf of the Santa Barbara community. So I'm going to take you through the most important findings, which were the economic impact of the cruise industry to Santa Barbara in 2016, and then some of the softer detail and the findings that we found from surveying these passengers, which have these long tail benefits of building your premier destination brand here in Santa Barbara and hopefully getting these people to return now that you've exposed them to the great experience that you provide there. So the number one objective of the research that we conducted was to measure the economic impact of the cruise industry to Santa Barbara, what these passengers bring in terms of spending and having cruises stop here. The methodology that we employed was very simple. We, as a company, really believe in collecting direct information from customers, and that's what we did. We had a very short, so that people would be willing to take it, a short 14-question survey, which was self-administered. So our survey staff was out there. As passengers were coming back onto the ship, we asked them if they would take this short survey. They filled it out themselves. Visit Santa Barbara generously provided incentive for these cruise ship passengers to take this survey. It was a lens cloth for them to wipe their sunglasses with. We surveyed a variety of cruise ships, so it's not just luxury in the sample here. These are also budget cruise ships or less expensive cruise ships that we also surveyed passengers from. In total, we surveyed 804 cruise passengers in 2016. So we'll look at the economic impact estimates now, and I've included the 2013 findings here for your reference as well. There's a lot of detail in here, which you can see. I won't go over an exhaustive detail. I've found as a researcher that makes people go to sleep. So I'm going to just call out the major findings, which was in 2016, the cruise industry had an economic impact to Santa Barbara of $3.9 million in direct visitor spending, fiscal impact, and other excursion-related economic activity. That is up 61% from 2013 when you got this going. The main driver of that is that you have more ships now. Spending is up, but because you've brought more ships in, that's really what has driven the economic benefit. And then the spending, I just wanted to call out a couple of things from the direct visitor spending generated by these cruise passengers. We see your restaurants here in Santa Barbara and your entertainment and sightseeing have the biggest change in the impact that they've gotten. It's increased enormously, the impact that they've received from the cruise passenger spending in Santa Barbara. And then this pie is just showing how that $3.9 million in impact is distributed. Again, your restaurants and your retail being the biggest recipients of that spending. And then, of course, the payments to police, the passenger fees, entertainment and sightseeing companies, et cetera. So definitely local businesses getting the share of that impact. All right, now I want to just finish up and share with you again what we learned from these people who disembarked here in Santa Barbara and how they felt about the city. First, I thought you'd find it interesting to see where these people are from. They're primarily domestic passengers. 72% of them are from the United States, but a big, I'm sorry that's not showing up correctly, but the 18.5% are Canadians, so a number of Canadians disembarking here at Santa Barbara, and then there's a good showing from Europe, from Mexico, and from Australia. Please note that our survey, though, was only available in English because of budget restrictions. So there may have been more than we were able to capture more Asian language-speaking, for example, passengers than we were able to capture in the survey. A lot of Californians, half the passengers were from California, but good showing from a number of other states, Washington, all the way from Florida, then our nearing western states, Arizona, Nevada. If we look down on a city-based level, LA was the largest, but then again, it's a good distribution across California and the western United States, and then even further away. As Kathy mentioned, over half of these people were first-time visitors to Santa Barbara, so this was the first time they've ever experienced Santa Barbara. If we look at who they were traveling with, they're primarily couples. And then we did have about 1 in 10 with their children. A major travel party group of people traveling with their friends and coworkers and such. When we look at what they did while they were here in Santa Barbara, primarily sightseeing, shopping, dining. And we asked them about other Santa Barbara activities. Almost a third of them went to Mission Santa Barbara. Almost 15% went to the courthouse. So doing a number of different things here in Santa Barbara. I also thought you'd find this interesting. We asked them what transportation they used in Santa Barbara, and over a third of them said they used the 50-cent shuttle. So their spending while they're here in Santa Barbara, the mean came out to $109.25 per passenger. So about half of them are spending between $0 and $100, and the other half is spending above $100 while they're here in Santa Barbara. And then if we look at their satisfaction with their experience here in Santa Barbara, it's a big pat on the back to those restaurants and stores and tour operators, because we see an enormously satisfied audience here. You always want to be in what we call the top box, which is the very satisfied. And you have over 3/4 of these people giving you that top rating. They are very satisfied with the experience they had here in Santa Barbara. We also asked them in more detail about how their Santa Barbara experience either was better or far exceeded their expectation. And what you're seeing here on the chart is the percent that said it was better or a lot better than they were expecting. And even though Santa Barbara is really known for its beauty, it far exceeded people's expectation for how beautiful it is. Another pat on the back, people their expectations were exceeded for how friendly the people are in Santa Barbara, what a relaxing and ambiance it is, and that there's a lot to do and a great food scene. And then the last two things I wanted to share with you, one is even though they're highly satisfied, it's always good to look at what they feel can be done better. And so this is the percent of people that had something to say on certain recommendations. The number one, most common, still only by 14.1% though, was they thought it could be made better if there were more buses or shuttle service. There was some suggestion for alleviating the onboarding congestion at the cruise ship. And then the third most common was addressing the homelessness issue. And then the last thing I'll leave you with, again, how important it is to be getting all these new people to experience Santa Barbara. This is when they said they would likely visit Santa Barbara next, and you see there's a significant number of people, almost half of them saying that they are going to come back in the next 2 years, sometime in the next 2 years. And if you do get them to come back and stay in one of your hotels, their economic impact will go up by probably about 5 to 6 times. So thank you very much.
So in terms of next steps, as you can see, this has been a win-win situation for everyone, certainly for our community, for our tour operators, for Visit Santa Barbara, and even for our lodging industry who will see future visitation. We're currently working on what we're referring to as a bounce-back program, again, trying to get and encourage those first-time visitors to return to Santa Barbara within the next either 1 to 2 months or certainly within the next 18 months as well, too. And that concludes our presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I don't see any speaker slips. Any questions or comments at this point? Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I just want to say this is another great presentation from Visit Santa Barbara. That you always do a great job putting the math together. Is there any effort that is done with folks that are coming and going on the cruise ships to kind of capture their personal information to contact them again, to make that push that you're describing?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hart, no, we're not able to ask for that information. Mm-hmm. I believe you tried to do that, right? Or
you need to be on the microphone, unfortunately.
So we did not in this particular case, and I don't believe that we did during the survey. Is that correct, Aaron? Yes. But we can certainly check into that.
Yes,
about, absolutely.
I mean, it is as you said, 50% of the people are thinking about coming back. That's a great audience.
So one of the ideas that we have for a bounce back program is providing some communication, so some signage, and then also postcard distribution. Mm-hmm. And then in that, on those signs would actually be a URL address that people could actually refer to that would provide discounts to some of the hotels for future visits as well, too. And we can also capture some of the data then through that way.
That's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for Mr. Riedman, please. I get emails about concerns about discharge of waste from the cruise ships and also that they might carry viruses. And I'm sorry, this is a great presentation. It's my job to ask those questions on behalf of my constituents, so thanks.
Well, we've had incidences of norovirus, which is a food poisoning type of thing, on a couple of ships several years ago, and we just went straight to the county health department and had the experts deal with it, because we certainly aren't experts on dealing with that sort of thing. And they boarded the ship, met with the ship's operator, found out that the protocols were in place, kept the infected passengers on the ship, and the tours were allowed to go on. In terms of pollution, the federal rule for releasing waste in the ocean is 4 miles from shore. We make the captain sign a captain's resolution since the very first ship came here, making that 12 miles offshore. However, in addition, most of the ships have tertiary treatment plants aboard, which I believe our city is
called our recycling water plant. Yes, we have one too. Yes, yeah.
And Channel Keeper does testing periodically, and we haven't ever had any evidence of dumping or pollution.
And one final question about air pollution. I understand they must adhere to some air pollution standards as they burn fuel to move?
Correct. It used to be they would burn a lower grade bunker oil, like even container ships and cargo ships that traverse our channel. But a few years ago, they upgraded that to a higher grade of diesel fuel. And we have had 2 reports, 2 complaints, which we directed, again, toward the experts, the Air Quality Control Board. And again, they went out to the ship, met with the ship's engineers, looked at the protocols are in place, and looked at the opacity of what's being released. And they have benchmarks for that, and it fell within the benchmarks. And I believe we've had only 2 issues with that.
Thank you for that information.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Great report, obviously.
Thank you.
Do we think that next year will be as good as this year insofar as at least the number of ships? Do we know?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, I believe we're expecting close to about 28, 29 ships again in the next year. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, we've pretty much leveled out at that 28, 29 figure, and we don't expect any.
No, that's fine. I'm not complaining, believe me. Thank you.
It's kind of the magic number, I think, for all of us in this community.
What we can accommodate.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the report. Obviously, that's a nice piece of good news. I wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Hotchkiss for his having brought this up now nearly 8 years ago, 7.5 years ago. Just it was one of those situations where we were in the throes of the worst of times, and Mr. Hotchkiss came up with this idea, and that it's blossomed and obviously been a really fine contribution to our community. So just appreciate that, and it was a good common sense suggestion.
Thank you very much. Let's be honest. The timing just happened to be perfect, and it all worked out well. It's great,
right.
but thank you very much.
You should still take the credit when you can.
All
Absolutely.
right, I will. I'm trying to be
That's
humble
right.
here.
That's right.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, as you know, this was a success from the start, and I think it was truly because of the collaboration with all of our different agencies. We all had a specific goal at the suggestion of Councilmember Hotchkiss ideas, and then we just all made it happen. So it's a perfect case study of how collaboration really works in this
and have
community.
done a great job on all parts. Thank you.
Also, a shout out with your partnership with Downtown Santa Barbara and others for the welcoming tent. I've received emails from some ship passengers who said no one else does this the way Santa Barbara does. So maybe that higher expectation of the friendliness and feeling welcome that really comes through. So that has been very well received. I was surprised to see how many people from California come here via a cruise ship and for the first time, perhaps. So that marketing for the bounce back, it could be a quick weekend day trip that, especially from the LA area, as opposed to someone from New York or something where that might be harder to come just for a quick weekend. So we like all types of bounce backs, but that piece of data in particular I thought was really very interesting. So thank you for that report.
Thank you.
Information's good. So we don't need to vote on this, and appreciate again you coming forward and moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So we'll move on to item number 9.
Item 9, unfunded infrastructure needs and polling services for possible revenue-generating ballot measure.
Okay. This is Mr. DeMore who's taking this over? Was that the short end of the... No, I'm kidding. It's all because it's infrastructure. That's why you're taking it over. Whenever you're ready.
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Brian DeMore, City Engineer with the Public Works Department. Thank you for this opportunity to speak once again on the needs for general fund facilities and streets infrastructure. Today's presentation has 4 main points. First, I'll give a brief summary of the current capital needs that was originally presented in the November council meeting, so that will be a quick overview of that. And then the second point will be a more in-depth look at the police department headquarter needs. That was discussed just, again, very briefly in November. We'll look at that in more detail today. The third item is taking a look at the sales tax revenue options and kind of contrasting that with the needs. And then the final point will be the recommendation to hire a community polling consultant. So moving on to the infrastructure needs. So this has been a topic of conversation, I would say, over many years, going back to prior to the recession. But the most recent conversation on this topic, I think it reinitiated in February 2016, where the item was brought forward to council and staff was directed to work with the Finance Committee, which happened over the course of 10 meetings in 2016. The emphasis was on general fund and streets infrastructure needs, looking at existing infrastructure as a priority, maintaining that existing infrastructure. $546 million of unfunded needs were what was identified, and that was over a 20-year horizon. So we were kind of looking at the CIP as a starting point, which is a 6-year document, but we really wanted to look beyond that. So we ended up with a 20-year time period. And then this came back, as I mentioned, to council in November. So this next slide shows the list of items that were included in that effort with the Finance Committee for the 20-year needs. And there's just two of them that I wanted to mention specifically today, one being the police department headquarters, and we will discuss that in more detail, but I wanted to highlight the fact that right now we have an estimate of $80 million for the building, but because we would need to borrow for that, there's also additional cost with the interest, and we have that estimated at $50 additional million. So the total ends up being an annual cost of about $6.5 million. The other item I wanted to mention was pavement maintenance. That's a $200 million need over the 20 years, so a $10 million average. And I just wanted to highlight, and I believe the pavement maintenance report was shared with council last week. That was recently completed by staff in November of 2016. We do this effort every couple of years, and when we do that, we inspect 1/3 of the city. So we re-inspect 1/3 of the city and get a new PCI for those segments of streets. The PCI is the Pavement Condition Index. So on a 6-year cycle, everything gets updated. So looking from the 2014 report to 2016, you can see some trends based on the funding levels that we're at today. And you can see that the PCI has declined from 64 to where it is today with a 61. Not surprising, given that in the August 2014 report, the projected PCI in 5 years was supposed to be a 58, so I think we are kind of where we thought we would be based on the funding level.
Mr. Dominguez has a question.
Yes.
And you may have been about to get there. It's with the fifth line, the 8.6 growing to 12.0, and is that line once you've achieved the 70? Or are you averaging in the previous line?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, the fifth line, the 20-year annual cost, the way our program works is it tries to give you the most cost-effective solution, and that would be to dump as much money into the problem as you can right away. That's not really realistic. We're not going to put $50 million in 1 year into this. So that $12 million is kind of a smoothed out approach to it. And at the end, we would be at a 70. Now, we would probably front load this to a certain extent so that we're not finally reaching 70 at the end of 20 years. Hopefully we could get there in 3 to 5 years and then taper off the expenditure. But the average we see is actually $12 million, 10 of that would be unfunded today at today's funding level. Does that help?
To be honest, it didn't really clear up my question. So
sorry.
the 5-year annual cost, so the previous line, your chart says 17.1 million. So that's going to be 5 times that amount. So $85 million to bring the sidewalks up to a 70 in 5 years. Am I understanding that line correctly?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, so I'll just continue where I left off, and then hopefully this will make sense. So looking at the annual cost to maintain the PCI in the 2014 report, that was $7.5 million. That's how much we would have had to invest every year to stay at a PCI of 64. And then with the December report, now our PCI is 61. We actually have to invest more money to stay at a lower PCI. So you can kind of see that as your PCI declines, the amount you need to invest just to stay at that level goes up. Now, the 5-year annual cost to achieve a 70, that would be how much money you needed to invest over the course of 5 years to get to a PCI of 70. So that's what's in our report. That's one of the baseline numbers that we've been doing for years and years, and we could look back even prior to August 2014 on what the 5-year cost would be to get to 70. And then, as I mentioned,
so are you saying back in August 2014 we needed $12.6 million every year for 5 years to get up from 64 to 70?
Yes, exactly.
But now we're at 61, and so as of December 2016, we now need $17.1 million each year for 5 years to get up to 70.
Exactly.
So there's that 2.5 year gap has increased our cost to get up to 70 by $5 million each year for 5 years. So we've lost ground in that sense in that time.
Yes, we have.
Okay, so that's, and then the next one is once we hit 70, what we'll need to pay, which is really the $12 million each year to stay at 70 after we get to 70. Is that what that is?
Not exactly for that one. The 20.
I was so close.
Yeah.
So close.
The 20-year is. The approach to that would probably be to put a bunch of it into those first 5 years and get close to a 70, and then it would taper off. So the average over 20 years would end up being $12 million.
And that's where I had jumped in. So $85 million would be if we spent 5 years spending $17 million a year. And then if we were going to say $12 million for 20 years, that's $240 million. So if we'd spent $85 million in the first 5 years, we'd have $155 million for the last 15 years.
Yeah, that's not how it works.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, that wouldn't work because you would still need to be investing every year after you've achieved the 70 to maintain it. And so that you can't just stop after your 5-year investment and say you don't have to invest anymore for the next 15 years.
That's not what I said.
Streets.
Let me repeat it.
Okay.
So this last line says 20-year annual cost of $12 million a year. So over 20 years, that's $240 million. So far, we're on the same page. So if you spent $85 million in the first 5 years, you'd have $155 million. And this is just conceptualizing 240. I know it's not going to work out that way in real life. But if we took this pool of $240 million that a revenue stream might produce over 20 years, we spent 85 the first 5 years to bring us up to 70, then we'd have 155 for the next 15 years. So that's about $10 million plus some change per year. So that wouldn't actually be enough to maintain it at 70. I just want to make sure that these numbers are conservative and not we're not going to be needing to reach into our pockets later. So that's why I'm trying to do this advanced math. So did that calculation make sense, or should I go through it one more time?
I think Mr. White, go ahead. You try it.
One piece in there is that if you do come up with that $85 million in the first 5 years, you're probably borrowing it. So there's going to then be, and that's going to be probably for the life of the tax. So that's going to be another chunk that would get set aside for paying the interest. If you're front loading, that's going to be part of the strategy.
Right, as opposed to getting it through a sales tax that's a constant stream.
No,
the
but
sales
it's-
tax would pay for the debt.
Right.
If you wanted to borrow like the 240 as opposed to...
Well, you're going to have to borrow,
the
let's just say
85.
the 85 for the first 5 years. A chunk of that's going to have to be borrowed to get to 85.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a million ways to slice this pie. I just want to make sure that the way you've sliced it here today in front of us, that in 4 years you don't come back to us and say, there was a mistake in that calculation. There may, the economy may change and it may rain a lot, hopefully, and the roads deteriorate faster as a consequence. But I just want to make sure, because the mayor, asked about, in this 2.5 year gap since then, the cost has gone up $25 million. So one of the things I'm curious about in terms of our predictive power was 2.5 years ago, were we warned that this cost is going to go up?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, no, we knew that. We knew it's because PCI has gone down. That's why the cost has gone up. We knew that, and we've been delaying putting more money. Well, we've tried to put more money in our own budget with the money that we have, but we know that the longer you wait, the more expensive it will be, not only just to maintain what you have, but to improve it. So that's not a surprise. It's just showing, I think, the consequence of holding off to repair roads over time. It's actually costing you more money in the long run.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really, to achieve and maintain 70, it's going to be more than $240 million. Is that correct?
No, we believe that the $240 million, which includes some existing funds, the $40 million of that is funded, and then $200 million is the unfunded need. We do believe through the program that we have that it would be enough to maintain it. Now, as you can see from this
Well, hold on. I don't want to mix up funded and unfunded amounts, because that gets into a lot of unknowns or a lot of data we just don't have in front of us. Like there's Senate Bill and Assembly Bill 1 currently.
You know what? I'm going to stop here. You have that stuff in this presentation. Why don't you finish the presentation and then we can get it? Because I think you're jumping ahead to things that he's going to answer.
So I just want to make sure then we could add in a line 6 that would have another version of this 20-year annual cost to maintain a 70. That would have the first 5 years at $85 million. And then if you're saying it's going to cost us $12 million per year after that to maintain it, 12 times 15 would be what we would add to 85 to get the total. Would that give a more accurate and reliable?
We can get more detailed with this program, where we can actually plug in exactly how much money we're going to invest every single year. For this purpose, right now, today, where we're at, I think we're looking not on the order of magnitude. I think we're pretty confident in this number, but is it 12 or is it 11 and a half? Like you're saying, there's many ways to approach this and to divvy out the money, and will we front load it or will we not front load? I think there's a lot of things that are still open for discussion, but I think for where we're at today, this number is a solid number to make a decision and move forward.
Okay, and so that would add up to 265 if we did it where you actually use your 5-year number, and then the $12 million a year you use in the next line.
Why don't you keep going?
Thank you. So this next slide, I think illustrates what we've just been talking about. We're on the steepest part of this curve where you've got PCI, and with time it declines, and as it declines, the cost to maintain that goes up. Now, there's no real time scale on here. I think that's for a reason. We lived in the last 5 years with an extreme drought. The only thing it was good for, I think, was for maintaining our roads, where we were only putting $2 million into our roads, and thankfully it didn't decline further than it has. However, we have gotten some recent rains, and I'm sure people driving around have seen some rapid degradation, and I have a few just from my own driving around that people may recognize. Gillespie, thankfully this is on our list for Zone 3. It's part of the contract that was recently awarded by Council, and the only thing, and one of the reasons I wanted to highlight this, is because this area, the contractor can't just go in and grind that and then put a new cap on it and call it good. There'll have to be some, what I call surgery there, where they go and dig that out and fix it really good so that when the cap, the overlay comes on, it will last. those areas have grown, so that will add a little bit of cost to that contract. I think we have enough change order that it's going to be fine. But this is just one example where you can see that introduce a little bit of rain and you can see areas of degradation rapidly expanding. Anacapa is another one. It's a highly trafficked route with a lot of buses. And I think every one of the intersections, as you come down from Mitchell to Reyna and towards Carrillo, they're in pretty rough shape. Concern here is we've got the SCE project that is coming up, and there will be a lot of trenching in the downtown area. So it doesn't make sense to do a full-width overlay of Anacapa Street right now. We kind of have to wait for Edison to be done and for that dust to settle. But looking at that picture, I don't think that's going to last until after the Edison project. So we were just talking to our streets operations crews today about maybe doing some work to Band-Aid this. So I'm sure people have witnessed that on Anacapa Street. Portezuelo is another one. That is part of the Zone 3 contract, thankfully. This is where you have a bus stop. There's a lot of buses that come through here, and that puts a lot of stress on the roadway. And then Mission Street, among other issues, the pavement is deteriorating, and that was it was quite obvious during the recent rainfalls.
Mr. Hopkins has a question.
If I could ask you just for a moment. Do we not only go zone 3, whatever, but look around for ones that have suddenly gotten worse? And the reason I ask that is that driving APS has become a slalom between some really serious potholes that emerged, I guess, because of the rain.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, we do try to stick to the zone, but I'd say more and more we have evolved into a more of a triage mode where we're reaching out, and we can't wait 3 years, we can't wait 4 years to go take care of Las Positas or Mission or whatever it's usually an arterial, a heavily traveled street. And so we'll reach outside of the zone and include that in the contract. That's typically how we've been doing it the last few years. APS is one that we've been hearing a lot about recently, and today in our meeting we were trying to strategize what we can do to help that one along. But there's water definitely accelerates the issue on APS.
Yeah, no, it's surprising how fast it changed. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So my second item for today is the police department headquarters, and I'll start off with that item, and then we'll turn things over to the police chief. The existing location of the police headquarters is at 215 East Figueroa Street. That's on the block bounded by Santa Barbara and Garden Streets on the west and east, and then Anapamu and Figueroa to the north and south. That building was constructed in 1959. At that time, the city population was 58,000, and the police department had a staff of just under 100. Building size is 28,000 square feet as it is today. And at that time, the building code was the 1958 building code. There were no seismic standards that were required. This was the first year in 1958 where seismic was even mentioned in the code, and it was an appendix and just a suggestion. And similarly, accessibility standards were not required at that time, as the ADA had not yet been adopted. So it didn't take too long, about 25 years it seemed like, based on looking back at records. After construction of the building, some deficiencies, issues were beginning to be discussed and brought up, primarily focused on space constraints and the seismic standards. Each of those kind of tie in. Every time you look at doing something to address one of those, you're also looking at accessibility and the mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So there have been a number of projects over the years to address some of those, I would say the lesser issues, but the necessary issues to continue to operate in that aging facility. And it's been over $5 million over the last 10 or so years. Unfortunately, none of those improvements are addressing the larger issue, those being the space constraints and the seismic needs. And today, we now have a city population of over 90,000. The police department staff is over 200. And we're still in that same building. Now we have to rent space in the adjacent annex as well as elsewhere in the city. Building code standards have drastically changed, especially with the seismic standards. And this is an essential facility which requires that it be basically operational following a major seismic event. And we have the ADA standards now, with the most recent being the 2010 ADA standards. So there have been a lot of studies and reports over the last 20 plus years looking at these needs, and I think they've primarily focused, again, as I mentioned, on the space and the seismic issues. And I did want to first talk about the structural and seismic issues, and then get into the space constraint needs. So some of the deficiencies that were identified in the seismic reports have to do with the shear walls, the diaphragms, and some of the connections between the roof and the wall. Now, as despite that these deficiencies have been identified, none of our reports indicate that the facility's in danger of any kind of catastrophic failure. We don't believe that to be the case. However, because it is an essential facility, it's supposed to be operational following a seismic event. So in 2010, there was a seismic retrofit study which looked at a couple of different options. One was a partial retrofit of the front portion of the building, and the other was a full seismic retrofit of the entire building. There were cost estimates included in that study. However, there were so many exclusions from those estimates that we felt like it was going to be a lot more than the few $1 million that were included in those studies. Some of the exclusions were accessibility improvements, hazardous materials, and also temporary relocations of staff while this work was going on. Probably the biggest thing, though, is that the project, if it went forward, besides costing a bunch of money, was going to make the space constraints even more of an issue, because strengthening the walls and adding columns, those sorts of things, were only going to take up more space. And that it didn't seem like the best path forward for this facility. And so additional studies were done in 2010, 2012, looking at renovation and relocation options. And then the most recent report was the 2012 needs assessment study. The 2012 study looked at 3 options. The first option was to work within the existing site. So that would have required, or would require, a temporary relocation of the police department staff to some other site, off-site, while the existing facility was demolished and a new building constructed, and then they would get relocated. That was the $70 million estimate. That is the basis of our current estimate that we've been using today of $80 million. 2 other options were also looked at, which would have required acquisition of land at a different location, and there were 2 hypothetical site sizes of 2.5 and 4.0 acres, and some cost estimates that were given for that. So that's where we are at today, and at this point I would like to turn things over to Chief Luno to talk about some of the unique features of our police department headquarters.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. Our police department is one of our unique facilities because, first and foremost, we operate 24/7. So it's got to be operationally ready to take on whatever is thrown our way. We have holding cells and interrogation rooms that have to be maintained separately up to state code. So Those two facilities have to exist separate from one another, and we have to maintain space to separate juveniles and adults, depending on who we arrest or bring into the station in custody. We have a shooting range to keep our skills up on site, and we also have to maintain some specialized storage area for our chemical and special weapons that are used or potentially will be used in critical incidents. We also have to maintain our CLETS system, which is our California Law Enforcement Telecommunications System, up to state standards, and that is the way that our whole records division inputs information into federal, state, and local databases and how we access it as well. We definitely need to maintain a secure crime scene evidence storage area to maintain the chain of evidence related to crimes, as well as there's different storage that's required for different pieces of evidence. Some things need to be refrigerated and others need to be maintained some level of dry storage area. And then we need a secure lobby. So as you've heard, our staff has increased significantly since 1959. With our full-time staff and our part-time staff, we've got about 260 people in our facilities. We operate out of 4 locations. Those special needs that I discussed on the previous slide is pretty much what happens at our police headquarters building. And in addition to those special storage areas and maintaining evidence and whatnot, the true public service side of our licensing and permitting is also out of that main building. Our command staff is on top. When you look at how we've added space, our annex building is the space that we rent, and we have all of our investigative services there. We've got our parking enforcement there. We've got our IT unit. We've got all of our community services folks over there, which include our recruiting and backgrounds, our beat coordinators, and our volunteers. So well over 60 staff members are in the annex building, and we rent that space right now at a rate of about $200,000 a year. We have animal control off of East Sola, and then we've got our dispatch center at the Granada parking facility. So our limitations are limitations for us as a police department, but also limitations for the public, and that's what I want to stress here. Our third floor doesn't have any elevator access. So the only people that can come up to our third floor, which is my office, our business office where we have some appeals, are people that can get up the stairs, whether that be injured officers or somebody from the community. We don't have any designated parking spots on site for the community. We have a half block of green zones that are labeled for 15-minute parking. But unfortunately, the community that comes in to seek services often has to park in nearby residential areas or commercial areas. And unfortunately, that's the same thing for our officers. We have an insufficient amount of parking spaces for our employees. We have 68 spots that are usable. So even our own officers often have to park in residential areas or in commercial areas while they work. And we do have limitations to our property room. We have 3 additional storage spaces that we're using right now. 1 is on site in a couple of our parking spaces, and 2 are completely off site. So the inconvenience to the community would come into play when somebody comes to the front counter to possibly pick up some evidence that has been adjudicated and they get back, or property that was stored as bulk property for one reason or not. We might literally have to tell them to hang on, and we'll get into a car and have to drive to the location and dig through a Connex box and bring the property back for them. The next item, cameras. I will say our building was provided security for a 1959 building. So we have a secure front counter, but there are some vulnerabilities that I don't want to necessarily discuss. And we'll say at minimum, security cameras could be something that would be easily added. But there are several security concerns that we have that will definitely be mitigated with a new building and planning for the future. Thank you.
I have a question regarding the slide with the estimate and the does not include land acquisition cost. What is the estimate? What is an acre of property?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Dominguez, don't know. Depends on where in town. That was just used as an example. If you could find 2.5 acres or 4 acres, kind of the cost you would save from just the efficiency. I think the thought would be if a revenue measure passed and included money for a new police building, we'd see if there's any opportunity out there at that time to be able to purchase and see if it makes sense, and also kind of reevaluate existing city property and just see if anything else makes sense. The location of the existing facility is very convenient for the police department. They like the location. It's just a tight site, so that adds to the cost.
Has the council made a decision on that?
No. Again, I think if the revenue measure passes and we have a real project to proceed, we would engage the council and the community in that conversation and either look for an alternative site or build on site. But that we would certainly engage city council in that.
What I'd like to do is do the reverse process at the same time. Let's think about what that number would be when we're looking at our revenue. So I'm wondering, and maybe I'll wrap this into a motion when we get to the right time, but couldn't we get these numbers first so we can conceptualize if it's going to be an order of magnitude of, $10 or $20 million versus leaving it there? I think those are numbers we'd like to be armed with.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, council members, the difficulty with that, we can certainly do that, is you don't know what opportunity acquisition is there when you're ready to acquire it. So we could kind of scan right now and see what's available, but it's pretty meaningless because it's probably not going to be available a year from now. And there might be something better available a year from now. So we can get kind of a ballpark estimate about what land values are and what 2.5 acres would cost to kind of give a sense of that. I wouldn't want to start going site-specific and identifying acquisition opportunities because I just think it's premature to do that.
So the $80 million is based on building it at the existing site? The asterisk down here or the bullet point?
Correct.
And then I had a question regarding the seismic problem. Is that something that's urgent? What's the city's policies on seismic deficiencies in our buildings?
It's a challenge we have. We've got a lot of old facilities, and they all have a number of deficiencies. We've identified the police department as being seismically deficient, and it's one of your most important facilities that you want operational after a seismic event. That's why we've highlighted it as the top priority. We haven't done seismic studies of every city building that we have. That's why you have a pretty big chunk of money in our unfunded capital needs about reinvesting in city facilities, because we think there are needs and demands there.
Thank you.
There's state regulations for police headquarters to have a higher standard of seismic safety codes, correct?
Yes, it's considered an essential facility, right. So it's required to be built to the highest seismic standard when you're building a new police facility.
Right. So sometimes we get questions of, this building's open, why don't you just move in there? And the answer usually is we'd have to tear down the building and start anew because of the seismic piece to it. Mr. Dominguez, you mentioned I might do a motion. I just want, before you start wordsmithing, Mr. Kalan, I just want to be sure. I understand today's action on the agenda is talking about putting money towards the poll, but and just I'm trying to, before we go down a path of motions that really don't fit into the agenda, I wanted to make sure what kind of leeway we have. It seems to me that we're looking at, do we want to authorize funding for a poll so we can get the results as opposed to other things related to putting money aside for police stations and things like that. So can you clarify for
Yeah,
us?
Madam Mayor, the council has a fair amount of breadth here in what it can do, because presumably any polling will want to examine the specifics of what you have in mind. So there isn't a real tight limit on how you frame what you want the polling to look for.
Right, the polling, but something other than some other motion not related to a poll for today's
Oh,
item.
you mean directing the acquisition or looking at land
Exactly.
acquisition?
Exactly.
No, you would need to come back on that. That's not on the agenda.
Okay, that was my question. I wasn't clear. But certainly that would be good information moving forward that we'd want to get should we move forward with this project. So, okay, Mr. Samario, I think it's up to you now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So we seem to have landed on a sales tax measure, so I wanted to give you some information on that. This first slide just mentions that the sales tax rate in the county of Santa Barbara actually went down by 1/4 cent. You may recall about 5 years ago, the governor proposed and the voters approved a 1/2 cent increase or 1/4 cent increase in the sales tax to help the state's finances. So that expired on January 1. And of that total amount, the city gets 1%. That's the state restricted portion for local government. It's the Bradley Burns portion. And for us, that generates about $22 million per year. So if you were to look at sort of the sales tax, an increase in quarter increments, each 1/4 cent would provide us with about $5.5 million. And, I say with sort of tongue in cheek, generally we've seen a 2 to 4% increase in our sales tax measure or revenues. I don't have a lot of confidence in that anymore. We're closer to the 2% range, but at least historically it's in the 2 to 4% range in terms of increases per year. So this is one attempt to parse out those revenues, and we've broken it down by 1/4 cent increments. What could we buy with each 1/4 cent increment, and on a cumulative basis. On the left, you'll see what the total needs are. That was a slide that Mr. Demore presented to you. That totals about $26 million per year, I believe, around that range. So if we did a 1/4 cent increase, that would essentially, you can see how it's parsed out. It would generate 5.5, and again, one example of how that might be spread out to the various needs. And then if we did a 1/2 cent, you could see that it's again parsed out, but it then brings in the police building. That's the $6.5 million. That it would be the debt service on an $80 million facility, so that could change, particularly if the dollar goes up, amount goes up, or interest rates go up as they might. But that's just, I wanted to point out the 1/2 cent. If your number one priority were streets, our need is about $10 million minimum per year. So most of that would go to streets, and it'd be hard to sort of say we're going to do a police building and anything beyond that, because that would consume basically all those dollars. It's really when you get to the 3/4 cent that you can start having a conversation about including really the needs for streets, and then also including within that the police building. That would bring you $16.5 million in today's dollars. Again, $10 million theoretically for streets and $6.5 million for debt service on a police building. And then a full cent really gets pretty close to the full need. It would generate 22, and it's still slightly short of what we need. But keep in mind that the numbers that we need aren't really on an annual basis. They're annual numbers, but some of the things like facilities could be done, over a period of time where the need might be in 5 years or 10 years. You wouldn't need necessarily that exact amount of money every year, but just for purposes of demonstration, if you annualize the total needs, it is about $26 million per year. But with 1 cent, it would get to the police building, the streets, sidewalks, and a number of other things, and it would obviously make a big dent in our needs. So just some data related to sales tax measures approved up and down the state. And some of these are not new taxes, but extensions of existing taxes. But between 2001 and 2014, there were 578 general tax measures. They could be utility users taxes, sales taxes, bed taxes. But 70% of those were approved from 2001 to 14. And from 2002 to 13, just the general sales tax measures, there were 174 of those, and 67% of those were approved. So again, general sales tax measures weren't special taxes, required 50% plus one approval.
That's true of all of those then?
That is correct of all measures, all those items, yes. And then more recently, in June of 16 and November of 16, there were 66 measures, sales tax measures that were passed, or 56 out of 80, or 66, or 85% measures were passed. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see how that breaks down. Of the 56 that were passed, this shows you how many were in the 1/4 cent amount, 1/2 cent, 3/4, and 1 cent. And you can see that 21 of the 56 were for a full cent and were passed in November. And then in June, 3 more were passed.
Mr. Samario, do you know if all those had sunset clauses to them?
I don't. How many? I would suspect that most of them had some kind of a sunset clause, but I don't know the specifics.
The League of California Cities, after every election, does an excellent with charts and everything of each, and so think we usually pass those around, but I think we have the last one. We could get that out because
For sure.
It's very easy to read, and it goes in whether it's the sunset clause, which city, the percentage of passage rate, all
Right.
that. Yeah.
And just to kind of go back to what Mr. Dominguez had mentioned, so there are some proposals currently out for transportation funding. I think that the people are believing that the state legislature is really prepared and willing to act on putting together something that would provide some funding to local governments. So the governor has proposal, this budget proposal includes a 10-year amount of sales tax or funding for streets. We would get about $4.3 million per year. Other bills, AB1 and SB1, those would provide indefinitely about $3.1 million per year. So it'd certainly be a big help to us, but still a long ways from being the solution to address all of our needs.
Are those sales tax proposals?
No, there are a variety of they include things like raising DMV fees and establishing the gas tax, reestablishing it at a higher level, and making more of a flat amount that's indexed with some CPI versus being variable.
I just wanted to ask because if we decided on half cent or whatever, we'd want to know that's it.
Yeah, none of these proposals would include a sales tax component. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Johnson.
Madam Mayor and Council. At this point, for Council to get good community input on specific revenue measures for infrastructure improvements, staff would recommend moving forward with a formal polling service. This would involve conducting a statistically valid survey of likely voters both by phone and online. The poll would be translated to Spanish to reach our Spanish-speaking residents. And then in addition to conducting a poll, we are recommending that we add conducting focus groups just to get a better read on our community priorities and facility needs. We released a request for proposals and received 2 responses from 2 firms that do a lot of work statewide and further. We were pleased with the work that Godby Research did for us a few years ago, but we were recommending this time that we move forward with a contract with FM3 for $55,000. Overall, they really demonstrated a solid understanding of our community needs. They most recently worked with the school district on their measures and countless other cities. So if Council approves the polling services, basically focus groups would be occurring in February, and then the poll would be conducted in March, and then we would be coming back to Council with results in early April. So with that, the action before Council today is authorizing a contract for $55,000 with FM3 to conduct the poll and focus groups.
Thank you. We do have some speaker slips, so if we still have any questions, that's great. Mr. Rouse, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Johnson, so last time we did a number of group outreaches and whatnot. How many more we this time? Before we did it, we did informal polling data, and then we did the Godby, which came up with basically the same statistics. How extensive would our outreach be this time? Because last time it was quite a number of places and meetings. I'm not so sure that we need to repeat that whole performance all over again, but.
So we would need to look at what our public outreach strategy would be, and maybe we'd have a few meetings where we present information going over our exact needs. But first, we'd want to start working with a consultant on, in this case, FM3, to get the focus groups conducted, see what we learned from our polling information, and what we gather from that effort.
And who would design the poll, or does that depend on what our results of the focus group is going to be?
They would. FM3 would. That's what their scope of work includes, with support from all of our staff team.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We did polling in 2014. Why do we need to do a new one? Just for the public's edification. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Miro, so at that time, that's true, we did a poll 2 years ago, and it definitely showed support, 64% support for half-cent sales tax. And now 2 years later, as we're reviewing our needs and different political environment, and even the proposals that we received in interviewing them, they talked a lot about changes in polling and what they've been seeing lately in discussion with our last election. So we thought that it would be best to confirm those results and give council good information.
Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Would the council have input into the questions being asked? It seems to me they should.
You know, Madam Mayor,
Mr. Casey?
council members, no, I wouldn't expect bringing back to the 7 of you in public session the opportunity to kind of craft the questions. We really think it's important to rely upon the professionalism of the firm that does this for a living and knows how to ask questions. If you have any input, we'd be happy to have it, and we can incorporate that and work with them.
Yeah, I mean, they just may leave out something obvious that they're not from here.
Yeah, it could be. They're very good at what they do. They do this up and down the state. They've worked locally in the community before. We also have the benefit of the poll we did 2 years ago that they'll work from and, use that kind of as a starting base. And so I'm pretty confident that they'll do a good job honing in on the key issues.
Can we give them the framework we want to know at quarter, half, three-quarters, and one?
Absolutely.
All right.
And we'd expect that today.
And also with a sunset clause on each one? Because I think people really have to be informed quite carefully of the parameters, because it can get confusing.
Yes, and we pulled a sunset clause last time as well, and that's a common approach to consider and test.
Mr. Dominguez?
What did Godby's bid come in at?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, it was $47,000 for the full polling services and the focus groups.
And I guess I'm kind of piggybacking on my colleagues who are questioning the cost, given that we've done it fairly recently. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hart?
Well, I appreciate the presentation. I think this really...
Wait, do you have we have
No, I don't have a
comments?
question.
Thank you. We saw where that was going. Hold that thought. We'll start with John, is it Coy? Cooey. He'll be followed by Steve Epstein, and thank you for your patience. And you have 2 minutes there right at the podium.
Madam Mayor, members of council, thank you for hearing me. My name is John Cooey. I'm currently the chair of an organization called California Concern. California Concern is a group of nonpartisan volunteer members who are joined together to try to address significant problems in the community. It started about 12 years ago. It involves people who have had a considerable amount of experience in the private sector, the public sector, and the educational structure. We have taken on, since we started, a number of projects in the community. I'll talk about 2 of them very, very briefly. But we began thinking about problems significant to the community, inviting community leaders in to talk with us about the issues in their area. And one of them was the superintendent of schools back in 2016. And we undertook the problem at his suggestion of addressing what was then about 70% of the children who came to kindergarten did not have a basic understanding of English or very little preparation in learning how to read. We took on that problem. And you may have seen a mobile van that is circulated in the community, maybe not, white with cartoons on the side, and it visited the low-income neighborhoods of the east and the west side, providing an hour of training on the computer every day of the week for the entire school year for children whose parents wanted them to be on it. And these were, for the most part, and almost exclusively, not children who are currently enrolled in the preschool. By the end of about 8 or 9 years, we had succeeded in reducing the number of kids without those basic competencies by 75 to 80% across.
You're going to need to wind
period.
up, please.
We also, somewhat after this period started, began to work with the county on the problem of.
You're way past your 2 minutes already. So
Okay.
if you want to just say briefly about this item right
Yes.
here, yes or no, or something, that would be great.
Well, what I would like to say just briefly is that we've been studying this problem with the aid of City Council and staff members And what we would like to do is assure you that we are interested in supporting you in what you're doing up to the full level that will really address the problems.
Great.
I
Thank
say
you.
that with some humility because we don't have a lot of
Great.
resources.
I have a
But-
question,
Thank you.
if I could.
Go ahead, Mr. Hotchkiss.
What would you and your organization do?
I guess off the top of my head, and this would be with some consultation with you, it seems to me that you've got to get the community knowledgeable about the full scope of the problems that are being dealt with, and I'm not sure you do that with newspaper articles. We are planning and have already started to make outreach to a number of organizations in the community, including the Chamber of Commerce and residential organizations, and we would attempt to assist in building some awareness of what the problem is. I mean, most people who drive now understand what's going on with the roads, but the financial aspect of things is
Great.
overwhelming.
We'll
And I
take
think
you up
that's-
on your offer to help us spread
Okay.
the word. I appreciate
Anyway,
that.
I'll let others talk more.
Thank you. Steve Epstein will be followed by Edwin Martin.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you. I'm going to speak very quickly because 2 minutes is not a lot of time. I'm here wearing two hats. I am a recently minted board member of the Santa Barbara Chamber of Commerce. I think all of you guys got an email from our illustrious leader, Ken Opplinger, yesterday. I'm going to cover a couple of points in there in case some of you didn't get to that email, because if you're like me, you get a couple hundred a day. But he goes on to say California is a difficult place to do business for ever-increasing costs, especially on hospitality-related industries. We'll see a number of small businesses close down in the next 5 years, increasing the number of unemployed and causing business income to suffer, in general, to suffer. In this environment, looking at increasing local taxes would seem foolhardy at best, and in normal circumstances, I would strongly advise against such an effort. But when it comes to the ever-growing backlog of infrastructure needs in the city of Santa Barbara, these are not normal times. Core city services like streets, roads, sidewalks, and public safety are being affected by deteriorating infrastructure, and we have no viable plan for needed improvements. Without quick action by the City Council, these problems will continue to grow and affect the overall economic well-being of this community. And because of these facts and a funding source capable of meeting the non-enterprise fund-related infrastructure needs, Santa Barbara must be found. The Chamber stands ready to partner with the city in identifying these resources and convincing the city's electorate that an increased tax burden is necessary. We support the item before you today to hire a firm that will conduct a comprehensive opinion poll to determine the best path forward and encourage a unanimous vote on this matter. That's from Ken, not my words. I'm now putting on my California Concern hat. I am one of the founding members with a couple of other members here of the California Concern. I think over the years we've probably met with almost all of you. As John Cooey discussed, we've been talking about this for over a year, and we really do think it's critical that, the demonstration here today of how this problem is not getting any better and how much more expenses it's getting to kick the can down the road, coupled, by the way, with the cruise ship presentation, which leads me to my comment that it's incumbent upon us to keep this city looking beautiful, not just for the actual residents of Santa Barbara, but for the visitors and the people that all come to Santa Barbara, even if they're not City of Santa Barbara residents.
Thank
You're
you.
reaching for the button because I'm out of time.
You're out of time, but thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
You said a lot in 2 minutes.
I could have spoken quicker.
That's all right. We heard you. Mr. Martin, followed by Don Benninghoven.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
I am Ed Martin, and I am a member of California Concern. And sitting out there, I thought, here I am again presenting something before 7 frowning appellate judges. Anyhow, let me first speak to the issue. I don't live in Santa Barbara. I live just on the eastern side. And so do I have standing to speak? Well, every time I shop on Coast Village Road or drive to Ace Hardware and buy something or go up to Danny's Barber Shop, all of which I did today, I'm contributing taxes. When my wife and I go to see a movie here in Santa Barbara, we contribute. And when we leave the movie, we receive and appreciate the public safety services of people who have spoken of the need of a new facility or a remodel facility, whatever that is. Nothing of this is free. There is no free lunch. Although there are certainly parties such as the Something for Nothing Party or the Free Lunch Party, and given the nature of our elected representative form of government, they have a lot of influence, and the fiscal can, gets kicked down the road year after year after year, and we wind up with these deficits. And that needs to be addressed. Now, the way that I would urge you consider is this sales tax. None of us want to pay taxes. None of us get thrilled paying our taxes, but we have to because there is no free lunch. And I would urge that you consider an adequate sales tax increase to meet the unmet needs. You folks are swamped with unfunded liabilities and pressing needs. And I don't know how you're going to do it unless you step up and be brave about it and do that. It's not my place to tell you how you spend the money. I'm urging you to raise it. And this poll hopefully could be used to educate the electorate about why it's important to do it. Not just do you like it or not, but why it's important.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question, Mr. Martin.
Go ahead, Mr. Martin. There's a question. Mr. Martin, if you can come on back.
I got the gist of your comments, but I wanted to find out, you mostly focused on sales tax. Does what you proposed apply to other forms of tax, or are you solely saying we want to raise this revenue through sales tax?
I am proposing that you good people raise enough money to meet the needs. You can tax dog licenses for all I care, but that was just a topic at hand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bennyhoven, and then followed by George Ryder.
I enjoyed being at a council meeting for a change. It's been a long time. I was 40 years with the League of California Cities. And as they indicated here, the reaction of the public to sales tax increases for infrastructure has been very positive around the state, which is a very good sign. My daughter is city manager up in Northern California, and she said one part of it that she had not anticipated at all is that it brought the community together. Because you can talk about infrastructure, street needs, and so forth. People can see them, can understand them, can be a part of it. So they worked with the neighborhood groups, and it brought the community together in a very positive way. So I think that's a good side effect that's important. And I want to compliment you for doing it very deliberately and very carefully. This next step is, I think, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. George Ryder will be followed by Bonnie Raisin.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of council. My name is George Ryder. I'm another California Concern member, and I want to commend you. You've really done your homework on this issue, and we've met with several of you, staff and members of council, and like the approach. I think that, we saw from the presentation on the cruise ships that how important our brand is and how people feel about our brand, but that's our largest single industry is tourism, and it's something that we've got to respect. And I think that the polling is a great way to go. I think you have to do that, and I will go out of my way and say I support 1 cent. I mean, the math to me just not going to get it done with the quarter cent, half cent, and I don't even think it'll get it done to 3/4. So that's my opinion, and I think you're doing a great job with it. Hope you get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonnie Raisin will be followed by Eve Sanford, B.B. Longstreet, and then Jim.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council. Well, I can't be quite as enthusiastic. I sat through almost all of the finance committee meetings and all the machinations of how you got to this place. And it's just accumulated over the years, and it seems to me that addressing it at the last moment and then with a poll that I'm not sure is going to actively reflect the needs of the community. The new unemployment figures have come out, and it does not look good for Santa Barbara. We have a significant number of our population who are on welfare and who nonetheless need to avail themselves of our services. So, I have a real concern about the way this was all handled. I'm just sorry that we couldn't have had an ongoing discussion regarding the Finance Committee meetings and the Public Works Department. It seems like everybody comes in, periodically, and then we're finally at that point where we need to create $80+ million for infrastructure and tax the public for what probably could have been addressed over a period of time to, if not correct some of the policies of the Public Works Department, whom I'm sure do the best they can. But I don't think the public understands that this has been an ongoing need long enough for it to have been addressed. So anyway, I can't wholeheartedly agree to
Thank you.
Any of it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eve Sanford, and then Mr. McGrew, you wanted to speak too, right? So you'll go after Ms. Sanford, and then B.B. Longstreet, and then Jim Armstrong.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council. On behalf of the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition, this is Eve Sanford. I just wanted to take a moment to bring up one of the infrastructure, a critical infrastructure piece that hasn't at least been explicitly outlined or discussed in this tax revenue is bicycle infrastructure, especially the unfunded pieces of bicycle infrastructure that are planned for and identified with in the recently adopted Bicycle Master Plan. I assure you that it is not the 6% of people in Santa Barbara who are commuting to work that are affecting our PCI, and that investing in bicycle infrastructure is a good direction for the city to move in. It's very cost effective, and it brings in just incredible health benefits, both physical and mental, for our residents. It helps reduce the overall budget that a family or a household needs to spend on transportation. It's good for our tourists and our businesses and our employees. I'm not sure if the streets totals that we're seeing in this presentation do include bicycle infrastructure. I'd like us to explore that, at least maybe, if not in this phase, at some point when this becomes a little more detailed, especially because the most cost-effective way to implement the projects identified in the Bike Master Plan would be during maintenance. It's a lot less disruptive to people's lives to be able to just do the construction in one go. And I think that as we do pavement rehabilitation, there are a number of projects that are bicycle lanes that are slated for streets that will be undergoing repaving. So the most cost-effective way moving forward and the best benefit to our residents would be including bicycle infrastructure. And I'm happy to see that you did include sidewalks as an explicit item. In closing, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Longstreet, then Mr. McGrew, and then Mr. Armstrong.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm B.B. Longstreet. I'm chair of the Parks and Recreation Commission this year. All infrastructure needs in the city are very important. As a longtime Parks and Recreation Commissioner, I've watched our capital lists grow larger every year. Last year, Parks and Recreation lost $890,000 in capital funds that were sorely needed to maintain facilities. We are launching into the restoration of the most important historic building on our waterfront, the Cabrillo Arts and Bath House. This project is not fully funded, and it is an important jewel in our community. We are trying to make safety improvements in our parks, such as Ortega Park and the Cabrillo Ball Field. The tennis stadium is unusable, and it is another historic site. So please be inclusive of Parks and Recreation projects on this list, as they serve residents and visitors to Santa Barbara and generate sorely needed revenue for our general fund. So thank you, and I do support a tax. I think we have to pay for what we use. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Mike McGrew. I'm here representing the Santa Barbara Police Officers Association. And our association represents the frontline men and women who protect this community every day. They're the officers, the employees, the sergeants that work and do the job, get it done. I've been here since the day that this was realized as a problem back in 1986. So for 31 years, I've lived with this problem. I've seen exactly the need for a new police department. We've had issues with security, with losing prisoners, issues with evidence and cross-contamination. We've had issues with dealing with sexual assault survivors and child molest victims and such, just to bring them into a comfortable environment. So it's about time that we feel that we're just happy that you're moving forward on something like this right now. We feel that we can serve the community a lot better, that we can provide better service, customer service to Santa Barbara, and that they deserve it. So we just wholeheartedly support this poll going forward and encourage you to move forward with any kind of ballot measure that would address this problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Armstrong.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, in my years sitting in Paul's seat, I often reflected on the many public improvements we have in this community, the Gibraltar Reservoir and the tunnel through the mountains, the waterfront area where a seawall was built, the Cabrillo Bathhouse, the airport, the harbor, the fantastic public buildings we have, and the political courage it took your predecessors to build those buildings and take those on. And most of those, if you look back in history, were done, took a vote to the people and asked for the funds to do it. And now's the time for political courage as well. I really think we're at a critical point where our community can continue to grow and prosper and do well and have that brand that we're so proud of, or we can let it slowly deteriorate and become an Atlantic City. And if you look back at Atlantic City, at one point it was a fantastic place on the East Coast. And so I encourage you to go forward with this, to have the political courage, not just now, but to support it. And, and I agree with the staff recommendation. And, it's not often when Mike McGrew and I both agree on an issue. And, maybe there's some common ground here. So I encourage you to go forward with this. Thank you.
I wasn't going to say anything. Thank you. That concludes public comment. It's to the council. Okay, Mr. Hart.
Well, I really appreciate the public comment. I'm glad I waited to make my comments because this was incredibly supportive and really encouraging. I think that this issue is ripe. The Finance Committee, as my colleagues on the committee know, spent 10 meetings of multiple hours going through this in fine-grained detail. And the conclusion of that discussion, I think, is that the full cent is what's needed for the community in order to make the investments that people expect. And I don't think the problem is as complicated as we might think, because if you think about two elements of this that are no longer, two revenue streams that are no longer available to the city, which is the redevelopment funds annually, about $16 million a year, and just simply the deterioration in the purchasing power of the gas tax that was set back in 1993 at the state level. That is another $4 to $5 million a year just by the loss of revenue due to inflation over that time. You put those two numbers together, this is exactly the problem that we have. Where are we going to come up with $22 million a year to fix things? Just to fix the basic things that people expect to be done, to fix our roads, storm drains, street lights, basic infrastructure, to build a police building that will serve the 21st century. Regular taxpayers understand that is the basic function of local government, to do that stuff. And we don't have the money to do it, and we need to ask the taxpayers to pay for it. And this poll is the way to find the answer to that question. What is the receptivity to that basic question? And this is just step one. We need to go through the steps, get to a conclusion, in the spring or before summer, and ask the voters for their support to do these things. And it's really encouraging to have members of the public here offering their support and assistance in this. This is really going to have to be a collaborative community effort to be successful, and I think we can be. I'm very confident. And I think getting the information from this poll, from professional people that know how to ask these questions the right way, and for us to be smart and to listen to that advice. That's the challenge here, is to let professional folks who know how to gauge public opinion in the right way, to ask the questions in the right way, and then listen to that professional advice and then act on that when we have that information. So I'm excited that we're at this stage and look forward to moving ahead.
Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I really appreciate Mr. Hart's comments, and I agree with that approach for sure. But I want to take a minute, first of all, and thank the California Concerned folks who you're sort of riding herd on this city, and I know on other activities, and you're bringing your experience and wisdom to bear on this, and also the effect of taking this back to the community through not just the channels of electeds and so forth, of doing their thing. So thank you for that effort. This is the first time that this issue's been one that has been core to my work here on council since I ran and since I've served on this council. Now I'm in my 8th year. And I appreciate that before that, a blue ribbon committee of infrastructure-minded folks got together and led by Mr. Armstrong and by the council at that time to start working on the inventory. Where are we? What are our problems? And those numbers, I think the number that came out of that report was something like $130 million. And so this is the first time today when that number has crossed the $500 million mark. So this is this is not a good thing, but it's at least there's more clarity, there's more transparency, and there's more urgency to this issue. A point that Mr. Armstrong made the last time we approached this topic was this city will go down in value if we wait too long, and that all of us who are blessed to live here, we know that real estate it's amazing that what Santa Barbara the world thinks of Santa Barbara. Talk about our brand is the value of our real estate is it's very high. It's a problem that we have in trying to house our staff and so forth, but we also benefit from the property taxes and all the other aspects of it. So in order to retain and maintain that value, this project is critical. I think that over these years we have squeezed other budgets in order even to provide the money that we're providing now for paving and such. It's each painful year. It's how do we triage this? Last year we lost the construction of a little park because we wanted to devote money. We wanted to have a respectable number to put forward the best that we could on paving, on the basic nuts and bolts. Not a happy decision to make, but it was made for the long-term benefit of the city. And finally, Mr. Rouse has raised questions about this police building, police headquarters. Are there things that we can do to make that a less expensive project? And I look forward to, I hope that this whole thing moves forward successfully and that Mr. Rouse will have the opportunity to squeeze on that topic and come up with the most value-conscious building that we can have. I think there are opportunities there and sacrifices perhaps that the city has to make in order to create a right-valued project for that desperately needed headquarters. I wholeheartedly support this project and appreciate Mr. Hart's support at this point of going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, and I very much appreciate Citizen Armstrong coming back to the hallowed chambers hearing and re-supporting this whole mission. And his point is true. There was a lot of courage that went forward in the first place many, many decades ago to put some of the buildings and the infrastructure we had in place. And unfortunately, because of circumstances, it will take an exotic source of financing. There's not going to come out of operations for us to be able to rebuild, retune, re-equip this city. We're going to need to find other resources, and this seems to be one of the most expeditious ways to do it. And it's a conversation happening all over the country, not just in California, but everywhere. And small communities and agencies are having to do these kinds of things to make the kind of improvements needed. I think the point that I think Mr. Epstein brought up about even the way we sell the city, what we do in hospitality is second only to government and what the city does for a living. And so having the city burnished, ready to go, ready to sell is what we do. Whether we think that's important or not, it is important. And what we present to people, what we present for our own citizens is very important for them to get to participate in our local economy and help us generate the sales tax we're going to need going forward. And clearly, the police station, we don't tell the story up there the way it is. Anybody that's taken a tour of the police station and gone down the bowels of that building and seen what our officers put up with every day, would be pretty embarrassed at the state of affairs. And so it's high time that we got after that and got after that in a very serious way. I'm completely supportive of this second attempt to do this. I will be asking the same question that was asked of us that we didn't get across the goal line last time, is how we engender the confidence of the voters as we go to this 50+1, that future councils will act in a responsible way and will get the projects done that the taxpayers asked for. I think that was a legitimate question back then. It'll be a legitimate question going forward, and I hope there's a way to craft. I don't know if it's going to be in the polling data or it's going to be how what we do with the polling data afterwards. But it's going to be really important for people that agree to this tax that the money goes where we say it's going to go. And because we're going to be doing the low threshold, the 50+1, that's really the only way to do this. And I just want to see. I want to see what the ideas are to make that confidence going forward for our tax-paying citizens.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. I'd like to thank Mr. Cooey for enumerating the projects that you work on. You got carried away there, but I loved everything that you did. Mr. Casey, can I start with a question about the difference between going out for a bond and doing a sales tax initiative? We would borrow the money to pay for the project to build the police headquarters and then pay it back over time. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah, the concept we have, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Murillo, and Mr. Samaro can chime in as well, is let's say we pass a sales tax measure with a 20-year lifespan. That's a reliable source of income that we can then go bond against that future income from that sales tax measure to get money up front. And so the benefit is you can get a chunk of money up front to get some of the capital improvements done quickly. You then have to pay the bond off with those sales tax proceeds and the interest on those bonds. And so it costs you more in the long term. To fund a police building of $80 million, we would likely need to bond some of the proceeds from a sales tax measure to fund an $80 million police building.
But we're not using property tax revenue.
In this case, when we're using the term bond, we're bonding against a sales tax measure. You could do a general obligation bond, which is a property tax-based approval process to fund improvements as well. But we're recommending a sales tax measure that you could borrow against.
Okay. Which should also require a 2/3 majority vote, I believe, for a bond measure, property tax measure on the ballot. That's another difference between the two.
Okay, that's a great discussion topic, I think. I attended the Economic Vitality Team meeting this morning. It's the countywide economic development collective, and we talked a lot about creating jobs locally. So I'd like to suggest that we start to think about a project labor agreement for the police department headquarters project. I can tell you more another time. It was a great breakfast meeting today in Buellton. And it's important to keep the jobs local and increase the prosperity here. I am ready to support. Did someone make a motion?
Not yet.
Okay. I move staff recommendation. Well, we heard it, so I move that we authorize the city administrator to negotiate a contract with this fine company to conduct a poll.
Okay, so items B and C on the staff
B and
recommendation,
C,
just to
Madam
be
Mayor.
clear. Great, thank you. Is there a second? Second by Rouse. Thank you, Ms. Murillo. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're going to take $55,000 out of reserves. Does that put us below our recommended reserve level? I wouldn't think it, but
Appropriated reserves?
Yeah, I think the money's coming out of appropriated reserves, so they're not the normal reserves we talk about, policy reserves. So they're monies that are already budgeted that are sort of contingency monies we would allocate toward this project or this contract.
okay. The second thing I would just warn my colleagues and myself, really, we're sort of expecting we're going to get a clear answer out of this. Probably not. It's going to come back to us with all sorts of information, and we're going to have to make the decision. And that's where Mr. Armstrong's admonition for courage is. You might come back to that meeting because that's probably when we'll need it.
Mr. Dominguez?
So I know there's a lot of infrastructure issues we need to address, so my comments aren't related to that, but just to the poll itself and the expense, given that we've gone through this relatively recently. and the high success rate that was pointed out with these taxes around the state. I'd be much more comfortable with a smaller expenditure or using the other RFP bidder. So I don't know, if it doesn't seem like I have any support for that. But the other thing is, I also wish we could put some of the other taxes out there. The sales tax is very regressive. I'd love to push some progressive tax measures. I know the sales tax is going to end up being the bulk of the revenue generation, but we're really hammering our working class in Santa Barbara with water fees going up, with other taxes going up. This is really being borne by one population. And I know from previous comments that when it comes back, we can try other tax revenue sources. The poll doesn't restrict us by any means, but it does influence where we go, because if they don't do polling on a parcel tax, if they don't do polling on infrastructure district tax, if they don't poll sin taxes, it's much more likely that this body is going to engage in a robust discussion on those taxes to share the tax burden with our largely working class city. We have a city where the average household income's between $65,000 and $70,000. It's a middle class city, and we need to make sure we spread that burden. So I'd love to push the polls back a little while and send it back to Finance Committee if there's support to do a little more reconfiguring. I'd love to get more clarity on these numbers. It just seems like there's too much wiggle room. You know, it's better to be conservative, but at the same time, if we're too conservative and we push for too big of a tax when we don't need it, you know, we could oversell this to the population.
I want to thank everyone for coming and speaking on this. It's a multifaceted process that in order to get to success, but certainly engaging the community and on something as complex as all of this is very helpful. So I appreciate both POA and California Concern in doing what you can and working with us and getting the word out, and of your support very much. The police station, as we all know, it's past time, for our department and the people who serve in the department, especially also for the community. And Sergeant McGrew, you said that very well about people who need to access services and feel safe to do so in a building that makes them also feel safe, or not very, very safe in a locked up room if they need to be in that capacity as well. So that's really very important. And I think to Mr. Rouse's point of being accountable for the funding, things like bonding for a police station, that's going to guarantee that police station happens right up front. That would be a decision to make early on, and certainly doing the initial work of what we need for roads and repair will also happen very early on. I also appreciate Santa Barbara bike and bicycle infrastructure. Certainly you need the roads to be not full of potholes too, because that's a safety issue also. But your point was well taken. And I think it's that kind of clarity of wording that I know the polling will look into about how we can very as efficiently and effectively communicate a complex issue to voters. I will say, and someone from California Concern mentioned it as well, when it comes to a sales tax, of course, people who live here are paying the sales tax, but a whole lot of people who don't live here, who come here to visit. The cruise ships was just one example today. People who commute here day in, day out, utilize our services. Every time they buy something, they're paying sales tax too. And so, that is, and we want to have them keep coming here and like you said, keep that value of the city involved. So perhaps as we move forward, I think the Finance Committee did its job as we did a couple of years ago. As much as some people may not like sales tax increases, when it comes to the amount of funding that you need and the ability to have the voters approve something, this is the mechanism. It may not be perfect, but this is really the mechanism to get the amount of dollars. TOT increases would have to go up from 12% to maybe 22% to get anywhere near the type of money we're talking about. That's just not going to happen. It's an outlier. So other forms of things that would take a 2/3 majority might be difficult. So I think we did the homework, and like I said, may not be perfect, but done well, I think is worth it. So for now, I think the polling, we'll find out, and I agree. Mr. Hotchkiss brought up some good points of making sure that the different increments is brought, as well as sunset periods. I know that was probably part of what they were thinking. Obviously, looking at people who will vote, and their expectation of participating in this will be important. So, but we look forward to the continuing conversation and moving this forward. So, Mr. White, did you have a comment? No.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to Mr. Dominguez's questions. I certainly have expressed interest in looking at a variety of financing tools over the last, 5 years. And but I want to say that now I think where we are is that in the future some of those may be looked at. But right now I think it's really critical that for triage purposes to come together on this. That this is something where what's going to have the greatest likelihood of success here is what do they say, the good is the enemy of the perfect. It would be disappointing if this just weren't quite good enough and we were losing support. I think that I hope that we all give strong consideration to this, because a unified council is going to be much more powerful in terms of, and more convincing, transmitting this message to our constituents.
Mr. Dominguez?
I agree wholeheartedly that the sales tax is going to be the bulk of this. I just wanted to try to mitigate the impact to the lowest income members of our community. And there's a lot of people out there struggling now, particularly with housing prices. I'm not saying anything that anyone doesn't know, but given the makeup of my district in particular, I think that's a voice that has always lacked representation, and particularly when it comes to taxation. So, the hotel tax, if we were to bump it up, I'm not suggesting we do this, but if we were to bump it up 0.5% or 1%, the county just bumped theirs up to match ours, so we don't want to let them beat us. But there are income streams we can generate here that don't impact our population, like the mayor pointed out. Those are people from outside of the town who would be contributing. And I got to say, last month our TOT tax was up, I think, 9%. So it's probably going to be down this month because of the rain, but these are sources that we just can't ignore. And I'm not saying don't do a sales tax if you can't add something in, but let's make the focus adding in one or two other small tax measures to reach that goal, whether it's $20 million a year, $25 million, or $15 million a year. That's not what I think we should debate, the amount, but how we get there. Just have more items on the plate to get to that same amount that we all do, in the end, hopefully agree on.
Okay, well. Okay, we know we have a motion. We have a second. We know what it is. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Was that a nay? There was a very small nay. One against, Mr. Dominguez. Okay, so with that, thank you all very much, and we'll move on quickly to council member committee assignment reports. Ms. Murillo.
Thank you. I'd like to congratulate the Eastside Merchants Association for partnering with SCORE. Last night they put on a workshop for small businesses on Milpas Street related to taxes. So, and it's a series of educational workshops for small businesses. I went to the Seed Exchange at the library. That was wonderful. I'm excited again, Madam Mayor, talking about making Santa Barbara Bee City, USA. They were all about the birds and the bees there. I'd like to congratulate the Mujercitas for completing, that's a girls' club at San Marcos High School, for completing disaster response training under the CERT program. I attended the Devereaux Foundation fundraiser, excellent organization, providing much needed services. I attended one of the CDBG Human Services interviews. That advisory group does such a good job, as well as our staff. The city's county joint affordable housing task group was terribly interesting. There's a new law, a new state law about that makes it easier for people to build second units, and they call them accessory dwelling units, ADU, not to be confused with AUD. And I hope we get a presentation about that, or the Planning Commission does, because it could increase housing units in our city. The AOK Breakfast, that's our after-school program. The city's a big partner. The Boys and Girls Club had a breakfast meeting. Mr. Baker talked about that today. And then the oversized vehicles, ad hoc stakeholder, and Mr. Hotchkiss, you can jump in if I'm missing something. We did come to an agreement about recommendations to make to the City Council having to do with safe parking, administration of daytime parking spots, and some funding they might need, and also city staff helping find more daytime parking spots for people who live in oversized vehicles. It's slow going finding those spots. So, thank you.
I will add to that if I could. Ms. Murillo did a good and difficult job of keeping it all going forward. There were a lot of people with a lot of different agendas, and she kept it going. And we did come up with three good recommendations. I think that completes our work there. I don't know if we're going to have another meeting or not.
We were incredibly efficient, but we did get threatened that the Sprinter people are going to file a lawsuit against us, if that's okay to announce.
Well, that came as no surprise at all. So,
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Hotchkiss, since you have the mic?
Yes. This is a little different, but Mr. Hart and I attended a film called Officer Involved that was talking about police who had been involved in a shooting, usually maybe always a death, and the effect that it had on them and their departments. And it was a very moving film. I was really surprised. I thought it was really well done, Greg. I don't know what you thought. Yep. And all really showed a perspective that I had never considered before, and I suspect most people had not considered before and didn't have the opportunity to do it. So if they ever have a chance to see that film, Officer Involved, I think it's on YouTube. I had hoped that it would be at our film festival. It didn't get selected, unfortunately. But anyway, great film, great opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Hotchkiss about the power of that movie. And I also want to compliment Councilmember Hotchkiss on his chairmanship of the Signed Ordinance Review Committee. We have a big group and a very difficult task. City attorneys leading that effort on the technical side, but Councilmember Hotchkiss is doing a really great job bringing everybody together, moving this forward. We're not to the point where the other committee is, but we're getting closer. The things I participated in last week was the Fire and Police Commission meeting. They had their annual planning session, so they're looking at their workload going ahead. The downtown organization also had its board retreat where they were doing planning for this upcoming year, and attended a lecture on water policy that the UCSB's Bren School put on that was very interesting and informative, talking about cutting-edge water policy issues.
Great. Mr. Dominguez?
I attended Downtown Santa Barbara's Public Safety Committee, and they talked about ongoing measures to keep the downtown area secure and vibrant, and they've got a lot of really interesting programs going on, so it was a very good meeting to be at. And Councilmember Rouse is here. He's not here, but I want to make sure we know he was there, too.
Okay. Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last Wednesday, I attended the downtown Santa Barbara. I guess that's what it's called, downtown Santa Barbara now. Opening meeting concerning our struggle for retail basically on State Street, and they've hired a team to give them some feedback, some analysis. It's a briefcase from out of town. I hope that it's worth that effort. Obviously, we have that's a real issue that we need to look at and try and come up with some new strategies for our downtown. But anyway, at least the downtown is continuing that effort. Also, a number of us, most of us here, attended the Barger Canyon watershed restoration ribbon cutting. A very cool day, and we had a beautiful day and a neat project that's been completed. And finally, I attended the Central Coast Water Authority meeting last Thursday. The issue du jour is obviously this paper water that we're about to lose. In fact, there was just I noticed that Mr. Stokes just fired off another email within the last couple of hours on this stuff is in flux, and we are even the deal that we thought we made to provide Metropolitan Water District with 3 gallons of water and then getting 2 gallons back proverbially later this year. Even that deal may be not as good as what's going to be available. So it's of course, I do think I'm grateful that we have the Central Coast Water Authority staff. It's as strong of a staff as there is out there. It's a group of great people with high esprit and high brains and good contacts in Sacramento. Perhaps that's might be the most important ingredient. But a very strong group advocating for obviously we are the last of the drought sufferers. It practically seems in the state of California, and it's. Obviously, as we've seen the Santa Ana's return the last couple of days, we are not out of the woods yet. We did get Gibraltar filled up, and that's a great thing. That will at least take us out of the total white knuckle situation. But CCWA is grinding away, trying to protect that purchased water of ours.
Thank you. Yesterday, I attended the LoSan board meeting. I was down in San Diego. I got to spend some time with Margie Kern, who's the new executive director of SBCAG, which was great, as well as Scott Spalding, who also does a great job on issues related to buses and trains. The highlight, actually, Brian McDonald, who's a council member from Oxnard, was voted in vice chair of LoSan. It's the first time in a while that someone north of Los Angeles is in the vice chairmanship, soon to be chair, which I think can really help. Working with him, we talked afterwards about how we can move this retiming of Amtrak trains along faster, doing whatever we can to make it work. And on that note, I was at an event at a reception for women involved in water issues, and there was a reception, and State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson was there, and I mentioned I was going to this meeting, and she reiterated her support and wanting to do whatever she could to help us at the state level in the commuter or the commuter-friendly train or peak hour service, whatever it takes. And so that was good to hear, and we'll obviously follow up with her on that. So yet tomorrow, actually, SBCAG's, the South Coast Advisory Committee, we're having our monthly meeting, and this issue, as well as the Coastal Express about the bus, will be on the agenda. There's some meaty topics to discuss on those two items, so I'll report back on that next week. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you. See you next week.
Simply must go.
But baby, it's cold outside.
The answer is no.
But baby, it's cold outside.
The welcome has
How
been
lucky that you
so
dropped in.
nice and warm.
Look out the window at the storm.
My sister will be suspicious.
Gosh, your lips look
My
delicious.
brother will be there at the
The
door.
waves upon the tropical shore.
My maiden aunt's mind is
Gosh, your lips are
Or maybe
delicious.
just a cigarette more.
Never such a blizzard before.
gotta get
But
home.
baby, you'd freeze out there.
Say, lend me a coat.
It's up to your knees out there.
You've really been
I
great.
thrill when you touch my
But
hand.
don't you see?
How can you do this thing to me?
There's bound to be talk to
Think of my lifelong
At
sorrow.
least there will be plenty implied.
If you got pneumonia and
I
die,
really can't
get
stay.
over that old doubt. Baby, it's cold. Baby, it's cold outside.
I see your face before me, crowding my every dream. There is your face before me. You are my only theme. It doesn't matter where you are. if you could see me too.
Hi, I'm Becky Davis with City TV. Welcome to Inside Santa Barbara, the city's only news magazine show. We bring you up to date on the city's most significant issues, projects, and events. As history has shown us time and again, our vegetation, climate, and topography combine to make our area particularly prone to wildfires. Because of that, in 2004, residents of our high fire risk areas voted themselves into an assessment district that funds a number of programs to address the challenge. Up next, City TV's Chris Bell goes over these programs and how they can save your home and maybe your life.
Wildfires. We don't know when or where they will strike. We only know that it's just a matter of time before they do. A look back on the history of wildfires in our area reveals a quiltwork of conflagration, with every decade in recent history having at least one major event.
So in the Santa Barbara front country area, we have a significant history of wildfires, and our conditions have changed over time. You know, in the 1910s, we were not as highly populated as we are today, and today we are have a significant amount of homes within what's our urban wildland interface areas that have burned, have a fire history of burning, and will continue to burn over time. It averages out to about one major fire every 10 to 15 years.
In response to the inevitability of wildfire, in 2004, the residents of the most vulnerable areas of the city acted to do something about it.
So the Wildland Fire Suppression Assessment District was established in 2004 as a result of a vote from homeowners who decided that Santa Barbara City needed a little bit of extra protection in their high fire hazard areas.
That extra protection comes in the form of 3 programs funded by the Assessment District. They are Defensible Space Outreach and Education, Road Clearance, and Chipping. Defensible Space is a strategy that aims to reduce fire fuel and vulnerability.
Defensible space is the area around the home that's been purposely managed and maintained in order to reduce the impact that wildfire has on a property.
A defensible home takes into consideration your entire property. And there's 4 components. The first component would be the vegetation that's surrounding your property. The second component would be to look at your access. The third would be looking at your building construction. You know, is it fire-resistant construction? And then the last component would be looking at, if there was a fire at a distance, how would your home respond to embers?
Defensible space is a landscape that is broken down into 4 zones, with the area closest to the structure being the least densely vegetated and flammable, and the furthest being more natural.
So 0 to 30 feet is a fairly open, characteristic planting with low-growing plants with a lot of hardscaping. The second zone tends to be more succulents, still kind of an open concept, irrigated plants. The third zone tends to be more Mediterranean types of plants, you know, not quite as open as the first 2 zones. And then the last zone is zone 4, which tends to be more of the native plants.
For evidence of the effectiveness of employing a defensible space strategy, all you have to do is look to the hills. Many of the homes that survived the T and Hesesita fires 8 years ago wouldn't be there if it weren't for defensible space.
So when we bought the place 2 years after the T fire, I guess, this house had burned down and not rebuilt. The one behind it, this one still hasn't rebuilt. This one had not yet rebuilt. So really the only one you could see standing right here is this single surviving house and ours. It was pretty well set up in terms of defensible space. You see the oaks around the property, but not too much other big vegetation.